Hello? Hello, hello, hello? Hello? Okay. Yeah, I had to restart the stream. Okay, we're back. So, yeah. I think the problem here, Frank, is that when there's when there's too many different factors at play, and you aren't sure which of them are relevant, which aren't, you aren't going to isolate the factor that you're trying to study correctly, and that will lead to those like very erratic results. So it doesn't necessarily mean that testosterone isn't a factor. It's just that as long as we don't have studies that properly isolate testosterone as the factor, by taking into account all other factors and calculating them in, we can't know. Yeah, so I'll read back from where I was reading when it got disconnected. I think it was here. Some researchers, like Harper, argue that there needs to be a specific limit on... Oh, no music? I guess? Oh, I muted the... Never mind. My bad. Some researchers like Harper argue that there needs to be a specific limit on women's testosterone. Above that, and you'd need to go compete with men. But many others say this idea of fairness is fundamentally flawed. Eric Villain, director of the Center for Genetic Medicine Research at Children's National Hospital, says that even if testosterone does give certain women a performance boost, they can and should still compete with their fellow women. Sports relies on abilities that are fundamentally unfair, Villain says. Just as tiny gymnasts do better than tall ones, he explains, there are myriad factors that give some athletes advantages over others. For that reason, he says, within the female category, testosterone should be degendered. It is a hormone present in both genders, which is why continuity of gender should trump levels of testosterone. Holt agrees. It strikes me as far too simplistic to say that the only difference between men and women is their testosterone levels. If you're going to look at performance differences, he says, you also have to look at sociological ones. There are almost certainly biological differences that mean men will always outperform women to some degree, but he points out that teenage girls are much less likely to compete in sports at school than boys and are given generally worse facilities. Male athletes are paid much better than female ones on the whole. Holt says these and other factors mean that there are a whole load of sociological reasons that may also drive men to coach and be driven to achieve at a high level beyond testosterone. Besides, the idea that a naturally occurring variation in some women's bodies is somehow unfair does not mesh with how much we exalt male athletes with unusual abilities. Michael Phelps' muscles produce half the lactic acid of a normal person, enabling him to push himself much longer without fatigue. Finnish cross-country skier Iiro Mentiranta has an inherited mutation that increases his red blood cells' oxygen carrying capacity by 25 to 50%, which is the genetic equivalent of doping. Those men were celebrated, not pilloried. Sports are inherently unfair, and while there have to be some regulations to account for true cheating, it seems like a double standard to demonize women for the same kind of natural advantages that we appreciate in men. And to simplify the entire debate down to a single, albeit important, hormone, ignores a great deal of biology and sociology, says Holt. We should celebrate those biological differences. So there's one thing that... there is only one counter-argument to this, and this is not to say that I buy into that counter-argument, but that is the counter-argument that will be thrown at people. People will... because... the preventing women with high testosterone levels from competing in women's category is dumb. But the reason we read this was specifically concerning, well, the recent controversy around trans athletics. The problem is for a lot of people, choosing to go through hormone therapy. Well, it will be seen as a choice. I use the verb to choose, yeah. It will be seen as a choice. And because of that, there will be people accusing trans athletes of basically switching, well, basically undergoing therapy in order to compete better. It's the South Park episode, right? Basically. I don't think this fear is warranted at the moment, honestly. Simply for a very simple reason. At the moment, becoming a trans woman as an athlete is very, very unlikely to give you better outcomes. I feel like you'd have to be delusional to think that you're going to get better outcomes as a trans woman athlete than as a male athlete. Your performance would need to be insanely different, and until now, that's not something that I have observed in doing my research on the subject. Like, once again, in the case of Leah, she performed at the top of her category when she competed as a male, and like the right-wing memes present her to have. Anyways, I want to read this because someone sent me this video to check out. I don't know what it's about, what bias it has, what angle it's going for. But like, this already is false. The ranked 462. I thought it was 490 something. I'll just pull up the evidence. Leah trans swimmer interview. Oh yeah, this is the one. Sports Illustrated. Blah blah. When does she talk about her competing in 2018? It's somewhere in this interview. Oh yeah, there we go. In her first Ivy League championships in February 2018, she had top 8 finishes in the 500-yard freestyle, the 1,000-yard freestyle, and the 1,650-yard freestyle. It's only... that was during her freshman year on the men's team. She started transitioning later, and that's when... So anyways, let's check out this video, and maybe then we can like read her entire interview.
I have a teammate who did not make finals today because she was just bumped out of finals, and it's heartbreaking to see someone who went through puberty as a male and has the body.
Okay, I think we know what bias. I think we know what bias this video is gonna have. Say no to males competing as females. Okay. So like, you can actually discuss this and be opposed to trans athletes without being transphobic. This is just plain transphobic. There is no way of like couching it in different terms.
Male be able to absolutely blow away the competition, and you go into it with a mindset that you don't have a chance.
Leah Thomas pulling away over the final 150 meters. Had to work for it. She was pushed over the first 350 meters. Thomas wins the NCAA championship.
What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about the highly controversial Leah Thomas winning the national championship. She is the first known trans athlete to win an NCAA Division I title in any sport, winning the 500 freestyle at the NCAA Women's Swimming Championships. Yes, so we have a trans athlete competing against women. So this is formerly a biological male who has since decided to transition to female, and they have improved their positioning quite substantially. The fucking difference in ranking is astronomical, dude. So I had this on my to-do list from a while ago when she was smashing records. For example, 22 years old, UPenn swimmer. He used to compete as a man, smashes 2 U.S. women's records in weekend competition and finishes one race 38 seconds ahead of her nearest rival. Leah Thomas, 22, won the freestyle 1650 freestyle, left rivals floundering in a 500 freestyle. Last month competed, so she's been getting a fuck ton of hype behind her in bad ways, a lot, to be honest. Like, the majority is not good press, and for obvious reason. This is an individual who previously was ranked 462nd, I believe. Here it is. Biologically, Leah holds an unfair advantage over competition in the women's category, as evidenced by her rankings that have bounced from 462 as a male to number 1 as a female. Yeah, so
when did Leah Thomas rank as 462nd? That's I guess all the articles are going to be like just repeating this at this point. Biologically, Leah holds an unfair advantage over competition, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I feel like the information that she performed very well at the before transitioning should be included in this. I wonder if it's an artifact, for example, of the fact that she, like, NCAA rules allow athletes to change gender categories, but Thomas needed a year of HRT before she'd be eligible to compete against other women in championship events. During 2 meetings with Schnur at her side, she came out to the men's team and then the women's team. Schnur told the women that Thomas would eventually join them. For her junior year, though, she'd compete with men, but it would be on her terms. At the team's first Ivy League meet on November 9th, 2019, Thomas put on a women's suit and swam the 1,000-yard freestyle against the Columbia men. She swam sporadically at meets after that, pulling back as she got used to her body and the slower times she produced. She was ranked 462nd as a male because she was competing. She was already transitioning, and she was competing as a transitioning woman against men. When she competed as a non-transitioning man, she had top 8 finishes. This like debunks the whole premise of the criticism.
Like, not that long ago, was competing in the male division, and this isn't a situation of like you barely making the cut of the threshold limits for testosterone suppression. But in addition to that, the time frame in which you need to do it, there are new NCAA stipulations in place for what you would need to be able to qualify as a trans athlete who meets, the recommended requirements essentially for
recommended amount of dedicated wham.
And no, it's not genital surgery, believe it or not. This is I guess a joke that was in the subreddit. Genital surgery is medically unnecessary by the international Olympic community. So this was in response to Pennsylvanian transgender college swimmer dominates competition, sets numerous records. So the reason they're saying this as a joke is because the idea is that if you just suppress your testosterone levels enough with medication, that you do not need to remove your male genitalia. So despite the fact that you have the potential to produce male levels of testosterone, as long as you are essentially like pseudo-castrating yourself with medication, you are equated to a female in performance.
Except once again,
synthetically equated, apparently, according to
we
the
haven't
IOC,
seen.
that's what they believe. And it's obviously highly controversial because if you still have a functioning motherfucking ball sack, like obviously there's a lot of potential for fuckery there, especially when you have medications that are in and out of your system in a very short time frame, which we're going to be getting into shortly.
Okay, as someone with a functioning ball sacks don't magically help you in sports, okay? God damn it.
The actual pharmacology of these medications, because most people do not understand this shit when they talk about it, especially when they get into what is like why it's fair, you know? Like besides the fact that you have, you're fucking taller, like especially in swimming. This is like, can you imagine getting like outreached by somebody who used to be a male just a few years ago, simply because they end up fucking taller because of their biological advantage during, not only through puberty do you undergo, you know, increases in bone mineral density, myonuclei curl through, you know, increases in muscle mass that you would never get as a female with 10x the fucking testosterone exposure. But in addition to that, the lesser amount of estrogen exposure, reducing the rate at which epiphyseal bone closure occurs, you get taller, you have
those are a lot
limbs,
of science words.
You get better leverages, like all this shit, especially when you're like in this sport that is literally like limb related. It's literally related to how your fucking limbs propel you through water. Like, do you think that having bigger lungs, a bigger heart, longer fucking arms and legs, longer fucking feet might be useful? I don't know. Like, does your foot get smaller when you become transition? I don't think your foot shrinks, bro. So, anyways, obviously it is, it's a highly controversial one. Ben Shapiro posted, all the best women are men today. On Twitter, which obviously, got a lot of retweets and likes and shit. So this
wow,
is,
what a surprise. Ben Shapiro is a piece of shit.
Of the podium, and two females.
Did not expect that.
I don't know, kind of disappointed, as you would expect. So anyways, there is a lot to unpack here. I mentioned the ranking going from 462 to number 1. It's a pretty blatant shift in what's going on, where you have somebody who is,
except it's not real. I can't. I genuinely can't. I can't watch this video until the end. If this is it's a fucking 15-minute video too. Maybe there's some more interesting stuff after, but if he's just gonna harp on the rank thing, even though it's inaccurate, then what's the point? I'm just gonna skip ahead.
Unintentionally, because that's just part of being a fucking female, where they lose a bunch of oxygen carrying capacity and performance, whereas you don't. There's so many things that go overlooked in this conversation that's like basic biology driven. So anyway, circling back to the national championship that Leah Thomas just won, here she is about to smoke the competition and take the title.
That will give her a lot of confidence. Remember, she's just...
I don't know if this would get copyrighted.
So there actually are arguments for his side of the discussion. For example, the fact that she's larger, she has a larger wingspan. There are women who have those biological advantages as well without being born male, or assigned male at birth, rather. But anyways.
So I'm just gonna fucking mute it just in case, but here we go, the NCAA championships, as you see here in the comment section. Surprise, surprise. People are not surprised. Congrats.
Hey, Komeister.
This is the equivalent of a NBA player going to the WNBA, watching ESPN. Comment section about to be a war zone.
Okay, comment section.
With the subscription, but this is the
review. Amazing.
Levels, and has done so for at least 1 year per the regulations. So yeah, the regulations are 10 nanomoles per liter, which is about 288 nanograms per deciliter for 1 year. So that means for 12 months, you have to have the levels equivalent to that of a male or lower than a male. I know, did you mishear me? No, you didn't. You need to have lower levels than 288, the reference range for a...
This is where I was saying biased opinions come in. Yeah. Reminder, the article we read earlier, some of the elite athletes in domains such as weightlifting have less than 10 nanomoles per liter testosterone, male athletes. Just to go back to the whole, testosterone is not the deciding factor in this.
A male is about 250 to 1,000, depending on what lab you're using. But a normal biological female will produce roughly 40 to 50 nanograms per deciliter of total test, have a significantly higher binding protein production and lower free test proportionally than a male as well, have significantly lower DHT, free test levels, and much higher estrogen levels. However, 288, what is this representative of? Well, it's about like 5 times higher, 6, 7 times higher than that of a cisgender female. So despite the fact that this individual says you have to have average levels of a cis female levels, no, you actually don't. The limitation is about
where's
10
your
animals per
source
liter.
on
Even if
that?
they impose the new stipulations that are being proposed, where you need to have 36 months underneath.
Like, and like once again, even assuming he's correct, then like, does that matter? Is there not variation among cis women in testosterone levels as well, which we just read an extensive article about?
5 nanomoles per liter, that is still only 144. Still pretty fucking high. You're still above polycystic ovarian syndrome territory.
And like, I'm not gung ho about about necessarily having trans athletes compete in their in their like gender category. Maybe there are good arguments for like other more minute categorization or etc. etc. It's just the evidence is there that testosterone isn't enough to judge someone's performance, and there needs to be also a fundamental argument about what do we consider acceptable biological advantage and what we don't consider acceptable biological advantage. It's just very iffy.
Testosterone levels to a point where you could not explain this unless you had like internal gonads, like in your, like intersex essentially. Like this is the kind of thing that doesn't really make sense to me, where you have a 10 nanomole per liter cutoff. You are essentially telling these individuals you can take estrogen therapy to induce feminization, grow breasts and do this and that, but you can maintain your testosterone levels to some extent as long as you're underneath here. You can still have Leydig cell stimulation in your ball sack. You can still have an unfair advantage up to a point where you have 6 to 7 times the androgen levels of a fucking female. Like this is viralizing territory. This is male levels. This is like literally you wouldn't even be clinically eligible for TRT at this point. You're within natural physiologic limits for most men. So I don't get how they justify it whatsoever. But anyways, so she's completed the, satisfied the requirements for 12 months of her entire life. So of the 22 years, you only needed one of those years to be under that cutoff. And the cutoff still makes no fucking sense whatsoever. But anyways, in fact, she has completed 2 years of HRT. Not 1, but 2. So, the height she got, the limb length, the leverages, the fucking, muscle mass, the bone, like it's all gone. It's all fucking gone overnight. Lungs, no longer capable of doing anything that they, grew to in the last, the first 20 years, of course. So anyways, though Leah has the support of her coach.
Yeah, this is just not the right discourse to... It looks like the right discourse because of the whole... What we just discussed, the whole question of like, is the... if you genuinely do believe that testosterone is like the be-all end-all for performance, then this actually kind of looks like appropriate discourse, but it just isn't. This just isn't the right discourse for the topic.
And many of her teammates, she has received immense hatred and backlash from the media and world at large. Yeah, I would imagine so. She was ranked, 462nd as a male, and then transitioned. I don't know, why not just compete against males? Why don't you just keep competing against males when you transition? Like, do you think you're going to do worse somehow? So now you have to enter the female arena? Like, I don't know. It's pretty obvious, I think, what's going on. In most cases.
You are going to compete.
This is just my speculation that an individual...
Worse. That is literally why she was 464th. Like, once again, she actually did compete against males during her transition. And that is why her results were so bad, even though she was top 8 before transitioning.
It's just very problematic, and you would think in your head you would rationalize that maybe this isn't fair to those individuals.
You would think someone who's going to make a 50-minute video on the subject is at least going to like check out her interview, like her perspective, where that information about her actually performing adequately is. But no, just gotta it's more important to spend time reading Instagram comments than actually reading the interview of the person concerned by your video essay. That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe, if I don't want to compete against males because I was a biological male for like fucking 95% of my life, then maybe I should just not compete at all, or see if there's going to be a transitioned division of some sort, which if there's not one,
yep,
in the NCAA, well, that's like tough shit, I guess. I don't know. Like, to me, it seems like a rational, logical, and like ethical fucking decision-making process to not strip away the chance for biological females who don't have this inherent advantage that you had for like building up for 20 years and stripping their chance of, getting a gold or something. Like, I don't know. Anyways, Leah's an excellent swimmer. No one's doubting that. Many accusations insinuate her success in the pool is because she was assigned male at birth. Some even claim that she's taking what other girls have worked their entire lives for. That's literally what I just fucking said. This dismisses several truths. Leah
she can't point that out. Doesn't fit the narrative. Yeah.
As a male. Like, presumably, if you're even a fucking NCAA athlete swimmer, like, you're pretty fucking
once again,
good.
I have no skin in the game. I'm not a trans athlete. At the end of the day, I'm not an athlete at all. The only skin I have in the game is when people are making those, like, bad arguments. That's the only skin I have in the game. Bad discourse.
To be, even if you're 462nd, like, in the country, presumably, in all of, college athletics, you are 462nd. Yeah, you're not close to 1, but of 462 of the top fucking athletes, you're 462. Like, obviously, Leah was good before as a male. Like, no one's doubting that. Well, some people, I guess, are, but that, I would agree with the statement. She has worked her whole life to be good at swimming. Yes, no shit. She's began swimming at just 5 years old. She's put thousands of hours into this. Of course, it's like when people say, oh, you take steroids, you'll be Mr. If I took steroids, I'd be Mr. Olympia. Like, no, you wouldn't, you fucking idiot. You would not even get close. Leah's not a great athlete because she was AMAB. Leah's a great athlete because she is a great athlete, has worked hard for 17 years to be great at something she loves. I agree. The belief that all AMAB folks are better at, I don't even know what this is, to be honest, that's why I'm just fucking saying the acronym. Better at sports is rooted in the sexist belief that boys are by default better at sports than girls, which is false. Yeah, so, I don't know, let's take, the top female athletes of any sport and pit them against the top male athlete of the same sport. I don't know, I guess put in the comment section who you think would win. Like, let's have Serena Williams versus, like, fucking Djokovic. Like, who wins? I'm pretty sure she herself said she would get smoked. I'm not saying it. She's fucking saying it. I don't know. It just seems to me like no one is saying you can't be a good athlete as a female. No one is saying.
And once again, that just depends on the sport.
The top sprinter in the world who's female, like she's gonna shit on like 99.9%.
There are sports where
ultimately at the highest level of competition,
where the women will
at the highest level of competition
tend to outperform the men
imposed on them from all aspects. It's a fair playing field. Whereas males, same thing. But then you have an individual who has sort of blurred the lines a bit, and it gets a bit more problematic where it has nothing to fucking do with this, in my opinion. Anyways, elite sports depend on biodiversity. Those who defy white, cis, heteronormative standards are often accused of being unfair. Let's look at an example. Michael Phelps, winningest Olympian of all time. Several biologic features that provide unique advantages in swimming. Torso is abnormally long, his legs short. Wingspan 4 inches longer than his height. Lung capacity is twice the average, and his body produces half the levels of lactic acid the average athlete does. When tested, Phelps was praised as genetically superior, but when women athletes, especially women of color and or trans women, exhibit biological diversity, it's called unfair. So this is a very interesting kind of like tangent, and it's what we talked about with the Caster Semenya debacle and the individuals who are
Why is he calling it a tangent? Okay, how is he gonna frame this? I'm worried. I'm worried about that choice of words. Also, I need to put down some meadows. Well, let's do this.
Biologically female, from birth, but otherwise have like intersex characteristics. And that is a bit more of a debatable discussion in my opinion. But when you have somebody who is blatantly male with blatantly normal physiologic function and is not some sort of situation that is having a, I don't know, like pseudo-hermaphroditism or something.
Okay, that's where the transphobia comes in. Calling someone who's transitioning blatantly male is just in order to dismiss the whole like genetic differences and advantage argument. I feel like that's innately transphobic.
You have an individual who's legitimately like a healthy functioning, like high performing male, and then they transition. Like, this is not about you were born with some fucking biological differentiation that made you the elite.
Okay, I guess Leah's Schrodinger's athlete. She's both high performing, high functioning, and yet she chose to transition in order to be competitive because she allegedly couldn't be competitive in the male category, which once again we've seen is not true. But yeah, so like we're dealing with Schrodinger's athlete here. Amazing.
Elite of your the identified gender that you are. Rather, it is you are identified as male, and then you fucking transition. Like it's a little bit different, in my opinion. Biological differences can provide advantages, but it does not mean they are unfair or grounds for disqualification. Okay, I think we are getting to the point. Like, I don't see any sort of like scientific dismantling here, or discussion of the pharmacology used, or the actual hormone levels.
I mean, you dismiss some of the more interesting points with disingenuous arguments. What am I picking here? Edge of Impossible or Counterattack? I like Edge of Impossible. Skeleton level, summon quality, evasion. I'll go with some extra skeleton level.
question. Like, they don't even seem to understand what the difference between what estrogen therapy, estrogen supplementation, and testosterone suppressants. Like, do you even know what she's fucking using and how it interacts with the body and how it can be leveraged to be at a more disproportionately advantaged position aside from all of the morphologic changes that she experienced as a teenage boy going through puberty? So anyways, let's get into her explanation of the whole thing after we hear Caitlyn Jenner chime in, because she always has pretty good stances, I think, on the whole situation. And
oh yeah, Caitlyn Jenner has really good stances on situations. That's a new one.
very, very relevant if you know her history as I believe she was an Olympic champion decades ago in the Olympics, like a fucking top tier athlete who then transitioned. So if anyone has a relevant opinion, like, it's pretty interesting to hear her weigh in on this. And this is what she has to say.
Leah Thomas grew up as a biological boy. A couple of years ago was on the male swim team. A couple of years of, hormones and testosterone.
Note she calls her a boy, a biological boy. Gotta throw in a bit of that, like, I don't want to say ageism, but condescension, Hey, she's a boy. Not a man, a boy.
Presence doesn't change a lot of things.
Yeah, it's on 1.25 times speed, by the way, if you're wondering why she's talking so fucking fast.
Hands are big, cardiovascular system big. You see pictures, her back is huge. She can run. I mean, she can swim really fast, and it's just not fair.
Just not fair. Okay. Now let's hear Leah Thomas feeling the effects of testosterone blockers in the pool. This is an interview she did a couple months ago, or a few months ago at this point, and she gives her discussion of the actual medication she uses to shut down her testosterone levels and what happens as a result of that in her performance.
Can you tell me about how the effects you felt in the pool from that, and what training was like, through 19, through 20, and even now, and especially if you're still in hormone therapy or testosterone reduction currently?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I continue to take estrogen and spironolactone, the testosterone blocker, as part of a daily medicine routine to, continue with transitioning, as it's an ongoing process that doesn't have, there's no clear endpoint of a medical transition. And so I continue to take those, and it's been a very interesting experience.
Okay, so before getting into the effects it had on her performance and whatnot, spironolactone, also known as aldactone, this is a diuretic as well as a mild anti-androgen. It is a steroidal in nature. It occupies androgen receptors and provides antagonism and some minor inhibition of steroidogenesis, meaning it will have some anti-gonadotrophic activity and prevent the production of LH and FSH. In addition to that, exogenous estradiol. So using oral micronized estradiol is the preferred modality.
You ready?
Administering
how are you feeling better?
Therapy at this point in males transitioning to females, as well as the concurrent usage of an anti-androgen, which is oftentimes cyproterone acetate, but in the US it is not approved for that purpose, so they defer to spironolactone, which I think is a pretty shitty anti-androgen in my opinion. Reason being is you can literally, they've used it in hirsutism attenuation. Hirsutism is like excessive, body hair growth, androgenic, viralizing features in women. So a female who is getting, like mustache growth or hair loss, stuff like this could be, hirsutism, which is in general induced by overly
hirsutism. I thought he was saying horsetism. Oh my god. Okay, I'm interrupting this mind-boggling content to fight Chinchilla. It'll be just us two, yeah. Okay, updating my stream title.
How social media is be structured.
Yeah. So thank you for having the chat with me, Bookie. I really appreciate it, and it was like really informative.
It was pretty random.
Yeah, it was.
It was super fun. I agree.
Yeah, and thank you for. I learned new things today, so thank you for that. So I really appreciate it. I will chat with like Neyman now.
Yeah, I'll definitely listen to this.
We're gonna just do a one-on-one, so we're not because I don't wanna.
Goodbye.
So thank you very much. So I really appreciate it. So
yeah.
Do people? Oh, well, he left.
All right. Hey, hope you're feeling better. I saw you're saying you were a bit sick yesterday.
Yeah, I wasn't like feeling like really well. So yeah, I had like a massive headache. But I hope you're doing good as well.
Yeah, doing fine.
Do you mind if I just boil some water really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So but yeah, looking forward to our conversation overall.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah.
All right, I'll just continue. I loop hero run. Ooh, a forest. Another Smith's Forge. Where did I put this one? I think I'll put it here. All right, so for anyone who is Chinchilla not an SGG memer, nope.
What? Oh, yeah, the streams.gg.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry, guys.
He's not.
So, but I love to talk with the SGG people. I think they are fun. They are fun people.
They are fun.
So, yeah.
All right, so I was thinking, what if we like open up with like our actual positions, because we like argued a bit on Twitter and everything, but I fear it would be better to like take the time to describe them, and then we can see what we disagree on.
Yep. Sure.
Okay, you want to start or should I start?
You start first, because I'm not updated.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so I believe that there are multiple reasons why the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, but I do think that one of the primary reasons that it did happen has to do with how the Kremlin, especially under Putin, views its geopolitical projection as a sphere of influence, and views opposing influence through what I guess we could call like a realist lens of viewing it as a threat. Even if this other influence is not necessarily threatening, they simply view it as a threat by default, because it's not under their control. Now, to add to that, I think it's also absolutely true. I mean, there's ample evidence that Putin views. There's the interview with Oliver Stone where he says that the fall of the USSR was, according to him, one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century. There are those essays that he wrote when he was younger, where he talks about the glory of the Russian Empire. There is definitely an ultranationalist sentiment that motivates it. That is kind of, well, not, I wouldn't say hiding, because that implies it's obfuscated, but that is behind the whole bullshit blood and soil stuff. Some people have also talked a lot about resources, which I do think plays some part in the decision making. But it seems like people really take issue with me pointing, and my impression was that you take issue with me pointing out that Russia perceives NATO as a threat to its spheres of influence, as a threat to its security. I'm curious as to why that is.
Okay. Yeah. So my position overall is that I think that when we talk about like Mearsheimer in general and his reasoning for Russia and saying that Russia has like a security threat is like 100% overblown. Russia doesn't treat Ukraine as a security threat at all. The motivations are like truly off. They don't have like a realist like perspective on this whole ordeal. And when it comes to Mearsheimer, he only can justify his beliefs in a post hoc world, saying that, well, they did this because of my interpretation. His interpretation is like bad science, because he will calculate everything into his like realism, because of the fact that he cannot be wrong. So his theory is like a flawed theory. When we talk about like philosophy of science, and we talk about like having good theories overall, we have like two ways of doing that. One is by going through like confirmation, and the other one is by falsifying. So when we talk about that, like what Mearsheimer is doing is he's only like saying like, well, this points to my theory, this proves my theory. When we talk about like the opposite end, like he ignores that. He is looking at like a pond where like we have all these swans. We have all these swans, and he says all the swans are white. But when he sees like a black swan, he's just ignoring that. There are thousands of black swans within his pond, but he's just ignoring what's wrong because it doesn't fit his narrative. So he doesn't falsify his like own theory whatsoever. So I think he's like full of shit, to be clear, and that's my position. So yeah.
Okay, so this is like I like it's what I said already in the tweet. Like this is going to be a problem. I'm not here to defend Mearsheimer. I don't think my position is exactly the same as Mearsheimer's. And honestly, I don't even necessarily care whether I do care. It's interesting. Like the fact that the Mearsheimer's theory wasn't a good predictor of European geopolitics, etc. I recognize those criticisms, and that is an interesting conversation to have. But the criticism was directed at me, not at Mearsheimer. So I would like you to address what's problematic in what I've been saying, not what Mearsheimer's been saying.
So you bring up like Mearsheimer, you brought up like Mearsheimer in your reasoning. I think when we talk about realism overall, I think it's like, again, it's like the security threats. It's like a post hoc like argumentation, which is like it's bad. It's bad argumentation to justify anything, and that was directed at you because you kind of use like realism overall, and I'm saying like realism is like justifying the past overall. I think it's overall just a bad tool to use when it comes to like science or like history.
Well, it's first off, one thing I agree with. I forgot the name of the guy that criticized Mearsheimer, but in the I read the article he wrote of a rebuttal to like the Mearsheimer why Ukraine's the fault of NATO thing, and he brings up a very interesting point. Realism is not a science. It's with its name it kind of pretends to be something more factual, but realism is an ideology. It's not a science. So that's something I guess we can agree on. It's an ideological perspective. It's a model that's informed by an ideological perspective, and there are situations where it can be true. There are situations where it can't be can be false. The way I'm using it here is very simple. I'm looking at statements from Putin, statements from the Kremlin before Putin, to inform my understanding of what it is that the Kremlin sees as objectives. Why is it that Gorbachev stated that he felt like NATO expansion in Eastern Europe was a betrayal of the sentiments of the negotiations that happened during the fall of the USSR? Why is that Yeltsin repeated those concerns when states in Eastern Europe were joining NATO? Why is it that Putin in the same interview with I forgot his name. The same interview where he talks about how where he mentions that he sees the fall of the USSR as the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. He also says that whenever there's a NATO base that is built near a Russian border, he feels the need to build a Russian base opposite it with missiles pointed at the NATO base. Those are now. Is that just posturing? Are all those Russian politicians over the past 30 years just LARPing about being concerned about this?
I would say that it's like overall when you look at it when it comes to like realism, it's like it's explaining something from the future about the past, and it's like that's why it's such a bad tool to use overall. So you can explain all these things with realism from the past, what you just did, but overall it's just not not a theory that you should even
Wait,
use
okay.
to explain.
Let's abandon the idea of theory and realism then. If you like don't like theory, I just presented arguments for why Russia views Western influence as a threat, or that Russia views Western, not why. I haven't presented arguments why it views Russian influence as a threat. I presented arguments that it does view Western influence as a threat. Can you just address those arguments?
So if we're gonna talk about Ukraine, you can just say like, well, talking about like security concerns, right? It's like the invasion of Ukraine, like is like a security threat for Europe overall, right? And it's a security threat in the sense that it exports a lot of grain to Africa. So when we have like all these things that you can call security threats, you're like arbiter of like what is considered like a security threat, and you put your own weight on those different things. So like you using all those arguments with like realism and putting the weights on those arguments, right, is saying like, well, it's reasonable that they thought this way because I'm post hoc like justifying, or well, not the war, but it's that's like I'm that's why I'm like I'm not gonna use realism because it's like a bad thing to
That's
use.
fine. We don't have to use realism. All I'm talking about is the fact that the Kremlin perceives things a certain way. I don't even think it's a correct perception. I really don't. I don't think the Kremlin should be viewing influence in Eastern Europe as a war of influence between itself and the West. But when I look at the evidence, that seems to be the case. Is there some contradictory evidence to the fact that the Kremlin sees it this way? That's all I'm asking.
I think overall, I don't think that Russia used like realism in their calculation. I think they use it as like a mechanism to say like, well, we were kind of reasonable maybe, so they use it as like an ulterior motive, and what they really want is just parts of the world joining like Russia, getting back that big old fat like mega state, and that's what they want. It's also like when we talk about like justifications of what going to war, they didn't use a realist point to go to war. So when we talk about like their borders, the borders were already like NATO was already on their border. When it comes to warfare, they could shoot like missiles from the US, like nukes from the US, to fucking bomb Russia. So that's not a concern either. So this whole security threat overall is just a way that it's like it's
because
not it wasn't like a security threat at all.
Because the first part of what you said, like I and this is where I realize like this I feel like this is going to be a semantic argument, because with the first part of what you just said now, I think we actually agree on how we perceive it. You just disagree with how I frame it. I'm framing it as Russia perceives its sphere of influence as what rightfully belongs to it. That the fact that it has influence in Ukraine, and that Ukraine was beginning to flip over to Western influence, was seen as a threat. Keyword seen. I don't think it was a threat. Once again, I don't want to fuel justification for Russian interference and Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. But I just also genuinely think that if you don't understand what your adversary thinks is true, then how are you supposed to engage with them? You have to have a good understanding of what it is they think, what it is they're trying to accomplish, and what it is that they perceive to be true.
Yeah, so I think in their whole calculus of like invading Ukraine again, I think don't think they are that dumb and that naive that they use like realism to justify this whole thinking. I think generally like they see this as like a possibility to like invade like another country, and in their calculus is not what realism is. So I don't think that they try to invade.
But earlier,
based on a bit.
Sorry.
based on like realism. So I don't think that security threat is like a thing that they think about. Like they have like other things that they want. They wanna get a piece of land. They wanna make sure that they get as much as possible.
So earlier, when I said that we were going to agree, it's because you started your sentence off saying that Russia was trying to restore its. I'm going to paraphrase. I don't remember your exact words, but you basically.
I just say like. I just say like I don't think that they are irrational. Like they aren't acting irrational based on like some realism. I don't think that they are doing that at all.
I would really like if we could move away from like the discussion of realism as an ideology and just stick to the discussion of what is Russia's motivations. I'm not here to be an ideologue. I'm not here to push like realism as an ideology or anything else. And I'm not going to fight over whether realism is the be all end all of geopolitical analysis or not. It has flaws, and I acknowledge that. But like what we're actually talking about is what I believe are important reasons for Russia's motivations in what's happening, and I'd like to stick to that.
Yeah, but your arguments are around like security concerns, and that boils down in this whole realism. So that's why I'm attacking realism overall, because I don't think it's like a theory like or ideology that we should
but then
wield.
Then you like only address partially my like very concrete arguments, which you did address. You mentioned, for example, and it's true that having NATO bases in Eastern Europe doesn't change mutually assured destruction. In fact, there never were nukes past Germany. That is part of the fall of the negotiations for the fall of the USSR that were respected by NATO. Nukes were never moved into Eastern Europe. Russia is ICBMs have strike capabilities across the entire world. The US doesn't need nukes in Europe to strike Russia, just as Russia doesn't need any bases in Southern America or in Cuba anymore to strike the US. All of that is absolutely true. NATO bases don't represent a threat to Russia as an invasion. That is something I 100% agree, and I've said many times on stream, especially when there's some like Russian shills in chat who are like, "Oh, NATO, NATO, NATO." I'm like, no, NATO never was going to invade Russia. That's fucking insane. That being said, what if we were talking specifically about Ukraine? What it does mean for Ukraine to for example join the EU or join NATO? It means that Russian interference in Ukraine is lesser, and if the Kremlin perceives Ukraine as its playground, the same way the US perceived South America as its playground, then instead of taking it as a lessening of its influence, the interpretation is that it is a direct threat to itself. It lost something that belonged to it because it never really saw Ukraine as its own independent neutral country, which it wasn't before 2014. It was a pro-Russian government. It wasn't an actual neutral government.
I don't really know if that addresses any of my points.
No, because I'm trying to explain my position, because I feel like it's being misunderstood. My position is that since Russia perceives that it has a sphere of influence it has to protect, anything that will lessen that sphere of influence, it will perceive as a threat to its sphere of influence. Now, it shouldn't be playing sphere of influence games, but that's a different argument. Unless you seem to agree that when you talked about, for example, reviving the Russian Empire, I see that as the same thing. It's as a sphere of influence. That's what being an empire means.
It's just more that when you talk about about perceived threat and that kind of stuff, and how you can talk about that, like seeing perceived threats and that kind of stuff, you can make this argument about anything and everything, and then justify it for every country, whatever. Like again, Ukraine can have like, or Africa, nations in Africa can have the perceived threat of not getting that grain anymore. Like Zelensky's looking buff tonight. He may be a perceived threat for me. You know, like I think
I'm talking specifically about.
I'm joking, but
okay.
I'm joking, but I think that perceived threat and putting that in a calculus like that, I think it's pretty like bad reasoning and
so
like bad logic.
You don't think Russia cared about the Ukrainian government no longer being pro-Russian? That didn't care about its influence on Ukraine? That didn't see its interests threatened?
It's more like when we talk about like these perceived threats again, to say like they invaded because of the fact that they had like a perceived threat is bad logic. It's like post hoc doing stuff, and that's what I'm wanting to get across. When you say like, seeing Ukraine moving away, that can be considered like a perceived threat. Can be, but who are we to be the arbiters of like what is like a perceived threat? Like if there was like it's like now it's like kind of going into absurdism, you know? It's like,
well, that's why like, I'm trying to bring it back to like actual facts and statements by Russian leaders, presidents, like actual PR stuff that was put out to justify different actions and different stances instead of abstract arguments.
Yeah, so why even use like the notion of perceived threats or like realism or like Mearsheimer? Because it's like it isn't a useful tool. It's again like in my original tweet I said like, well, Austria was considered like a perceived threat for Hitler. That's why he invaded it. So it's not a good tool, and that's why I want to stay away from it.
You still haven't given a clear answer. Do you deny that Russia had influence in Ukraine pre-2014?
I'm not arguing that. Of course they had, but it's like it's like
so
we can argue
if they
all
lost
those
influence. If your country loses influence that it thinks it deserves in another country, how would it perceive that?
Yeah, so you are now perceiving like the different things. Like you are putting the weight on the arguments. Like we are just assuming. So it's in that case, if you're just assuming, you can justify all of realism by just going post hoc.
Okay, like, look,
I think so. It's a yeah.
There is a fundamental disadvantage in this discussion and a fundamental problem that I had thought of beforehand while preparing for it. What you're basically arguing is that I can't read the minds of the people making those decisions, which is true. I can't read their minds. I don't know if I'm right in saying that I think I understand why those decisions were made, and it is post hoc reasoning. That being said, it's much easier to sit there and say like, oh no, this is like your reasoning doesn't work. It's post hoc. You don't actually know what they were thinking when they made those decisions. All I can do is point out those things happen, and then the Kremlin chose to react in this way, which seems to be consistent with my theory. Show me some part of their behavior that was inconsistent with my theory, and I'll revise it. Until now, all you're doing is attacking it on a fundamental basis, on a fundamental theoretical basis that doesn't apply, because I have actual arguments supporting my interpretation of events, which I admit it is an interpretation. That's all we can do. That's all anyone can do at this point. No one reads Putin's mind, and like apart from him, no one actually knows what are the actual reasons for what's going on, and his like closest friends and counselors. But my best educated guess is what I gave you, and it doesn't come from nowhere. But you dismiss, when I start giving arguments, you dismiss it as post hoc reasoning. How else am I supposed to try to guess the intentions of someone? People are black boxes. I can't read their minds. I can't guess their intentions. I look there at what happened, at their actions and their reactions. That's it. And I try to derive a reasoning based off of that. That's all I can do.
Yeah. So do you think that if if you do like the post hoc like reasoning, like people will use that to explain other things as well that might be happening in the future, and that's why I think that it's overall just bad, like bad way of like doing like
it's
like
it's philosophically impossible to interpret someone's intentions in a different way. Unless you can read their mind, and you cannot. You try to guess at their intentions through action and reaction, and it will always look like post hoc reasoning. How else are you supposed to do it? What's the better way of doing this?
Yeah, but people use that, and they will go ahead and they will try to explain like maybe like future conflicts and how they will pan out.
Yeah, and
And
some
I think- I
people
think
use
that's-
knives. Some people use knives to murder people, and some use them to cook. Like, are knives bad? No. You can use a reasoning for good or in good ways or bad ways.
Well, when it comes to realism, it has proven to be like so many times wrong because of the fact that it's like people putting weights on security threats and say like, well, this is like something that's intolerable for X nation, and I think that overall it's like just a bad tool to use.
So I agree that realism as politics. I don't want to be I don't want my countries to rule through realism. Realism tends to fall very fast into the prisoner's dilemma, into very destructive behavior, and like if you follow it through, it's very destructive, and it's hard to create cooperation and true trust between countries under realist principles. If that's what you're talking about, or perhaps you're talking about like interpreting countries' actions through realism, which I'm sorry to say, there are countries that or governments rather that act in different ways based on different principles, and those principles may not be those that we consider ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just overall like, because this is why I don't use realism at all to explain anything. Like because I think it's like a toxic mechanism. Like when we have like theories, we should be able to falsify those theories. So for me personally, if you cannot falsify your theory, so because of the fact that you can post hoc like explain things within the like the framework of that theory, it's not a good theory. It's like a bad theory. It's not.
Yeah, but
it's not something you should use.
Yeah, but no, just to loop back, since we're talking about the intention of a person or persons in government when taking certain actions, intention is by definition, that's what I was talking about earlier, an unfalsifiable theory. When you guess at someone's intention, you can always be saying like, oh, they said this, no, they were lying. They said this, no, actually, what they were thinking this other thing. Intention is unknowable by definition, and it doesn't have to be a realist interpretation of Putin's or Kremlin's intention. It can be a completely different ideology interpreting their actions, and it will still be unfalsifiable because that is the nature of intention on a fundamental level.
Well, yeah. So when we talk about like intention, then overall it's like we don't know what goes on within people's minds, but we can argue about things in the past and why that happened based on like a realism, and that's like assuming that intentions, right? So I think that overall it's like.
And you're always assuming intentions. If you're trying to explain someone's actions, you're always assuming intentions. That's just the nature of the game. It's not a realist characteristic.
So everything is realism. So
no, it's not a realist characteristic. It's a characteristic of trying to understand why decisions were made in history or in contemporary politics. It's the nature of human beings being isolated islands. It has nothing to do with realism or anything else. If you're sitting there saying that
why use it then?
Why try to understand what are other people's intentions?
why use realism to
Okay, then why
explain
then why explain the Kremlin's invasion with ultranationalism, with the whole with the fact that like what I talked about earlier, which is a really popular theory, which is also based on like the essays Putin wrote and the various PR statements from the Kremlin, the idea that they want to revive the USSR, revive the Russian Empire. It's the same kind of speculation. That's all I'm trying to show you. It's literally the same kind of speculation. You're looking at a bunch of superficial action-reaction things and trying to derive what's actually going on in here in a small group of people. It's so yeah. It's the same. You're at the same level as what you're denouncing in my use of realism when you're doing that.
Yeah, I personally just think we should strive to have like better theories overall. Like I don't if you know that the theory is like extremely bad, why bring it up? Why use it? Like it's like this theory is like on the surface level. If you just grab a book about philosophy of science and just read about like how theories and like things work, it's not a good tool. It's just a bad tool overall, and that's why we should just stray away from it. We shouldn't use it.
I wish geopolitical theories were more scientific, but that's just not the case. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you don't apply principles of science, of good science to those theories. At the end of the day, they are just ideology based. But also, this idea that's a bad theory, like, once again, I'm not sure what you're denouncing in my use of it, because once again, I'm not saying that our governments should apply realism in their decision-making. I'm just saying that I perceive that a certain part of the Kremlin's decision-making seems to inform us that they use realism to inform their decisions. How is that advocating for realism? How is that advocating for a bad theory? If I look at the evidence and ascertain that, then address the evidence. Tell me like how there's like a better interpretation. I'll go for an Occam's razor any day. If there's a better interpretation or there's a contradictory stuff, there's another theory that really encompasses all that the Kremlin has been doing over the past 30 years. I'll change my mind. I don't have an issue with that. I'm not like emotionally attached to it.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't want to go in circles.
Yeah,
so,
we have it.
Yeah. No, but it's so in your idea, it's like realism is bad, but I think Russia is using it.
Yes.
So that's your opinion.
Yes.
And
at least partially. I don't think I'm not like he's saying here like it's informing every decision 100%. I think it's part of their decision making. Yes. Sorry.
I think overall, if I was like super charitable, it would be on the level that they want to just have like a bigger country overall, which is like good within like the realist perspective. I would grant you that, but that's like again, that's like a nuance. That's such a nuance. So if I boil down like the whole realism stuff, it comes down to this extremely nuanced like thing, and then overall using realism in this whole like ordeal is not useful. So so again, when we talk about like Ukraine, yeah, I don't see that like that Russia was that naive that they thought or they perceived like as like Ukraine as like a possible security threat any less or more. I think it's more like they want to grab some land. I think that's more likely than saying that is like a threat or something.
So when I was talking about security threat earlier, what I meant not that Ukraine was going to be a security threat. But rather that losing Ukraine was a threat. That there was a threat of losing Ukraine. Did you get that like subtlety?
Yeah, yeah, that's but.
It joins, for example, the fact that even though they didn't give time for the naval base in Sevastopol to be renegotiated, so like I call bullshit on that. For example, on when Putin was saying that he was afraid that when he started the military movements in Crimea, he said that, oh, we're going to lose our base in Sevastopol. The new Ukrainian government had made no movements to renege on the deal with Russia. So on paper the base was not threatened. But if Putin has this interpretation of the world that is closer to realism, he will be thinking, oh, once Ukraine joins the EU, they're not going to allow a Russian military base in the country, or like the US is going to have backdoor dealings with them. They're going to betray us, which once again I'm speculating, but that kind of makes sense, and it explains part of Russia's actions in 2014. But sorry, I cut you off.
I understand where you're coming from. It's just, again, it's like we look at the things that happened in the past, and then we say, oh, so these things must be happening in the future by realism, just by, and it's like, even if like just you say like well, Russia was arguing that, right? Was arguing like realism. It doesn't make it that you sound like you found it like a justification. Sounds a little bit like a justification, like overall, but not that you are saying that, but it comes over that way. Can you understand that? Like,
I understand that there's an optics problem in presenting my point. Yeah, that I understand, and it's something I want to work on in presenting it better. Because I'm not pro-Russian. I don't want to fuel like Russian trolls or and all that stuff. But at the same time, I do want to feel like I'm presenting what, in my opinion, is an honest interpretation of events, and that honesty can go through addressing what will, like Russia's PR statements, and analyzing like Putin's and Lavrov's claims and all that stuff, and analyzing them in not in good faith, since they've all shown themselves to be bad faith politicians, but at least trying to understand what it is that they're thinking and trying to accomplish. Keyword trying. Like I once again, I can't read their minds. In the end, only history will tell like what was the right post hoc. Oh, history will tell us what was the right interpretation when we get like secret documents unarchived in 50 years or whatever. But I'm trying to understand what it is that they actually mean when they make different statements. What are their goals and what they're trying to accomplish? What are their intentions?
Yeah. So for me, like, it's like when we talk about like security threats overall, like, again, I think that you can weigh like security threats like in 10,000 different ways. Like, I remember Mearsheimer being wrong on the fact that he thought Europe would collapse and we will all fight.
Yeah, that was his biggest. That's like the biggest failure of his understanding.
And I remember like with Mearsheimer as well as saying that NATO was like the prime rule, because he adjusted his theory after that NATO was the prime reason why that didn't happen. And then Mearsheimer again gave more weight to the fact that the European Union existed. So he's like moving the goalpost all the time. Yeah. And it's like really ridiculous. And it's like so annoying. So when people either bring up like Mearsheimer or just realism overall, I start to cringe a little bit, because you can have this like super charitable, super reasonable interpretation what you are doing when it comes to realism, but most people don't use it that way. No, most people think that. Well, we have these Crusader King to kind of style Casus Belli, Hearts of Iron 4, justification goals. We gotta wait like 90 days before we can invade like a country, that kind of shit, you know. So, and that's why I stay clear from that. I can understand that you have like a nuanced opinion and that kind of shit, but when you bring up what you did on your own stream, realism in general, I just think it's harmful. I think it's just bad. So yeah, you can have your interpretations without like bringing up realism.
That's fair. Yeah, I can stick to like what I tried to do during this discussion. Be like, hey, I think this because this and this was said, this and this happened, and like not try to put it into a specific ideological framework. I think that's a fair criticism. Yeah. Also, honestly, what you said, I've thought about it a lot. I haven't yet talked with Mr. Geek, but I wanted to do it last week, but we kind of like missed each other about the same subject. When I started like getting the same argument with Mr. Geek like two weeks ago, I've thought about it a lot since then, and honestly, the more I've thought about it, the more I've seen exactly what you're describing, like how people are using realism and in the discourse around Ukraine. The more I want to just be like full like reactionary and like distance myself away from that. It makes me cringe a lot too. I don't want to be put in the same basket as those people. Since I'm really not advocating for the same thing.
Nick Fuentes argues for realism, so there you go.
Nice. And while we're at that, what's the name of that motherfucker? Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer is pro NATO is pro Ukraine in this. Okay, while we're at it.
That's interesting.
I watched a little bit of the Richard Spencer Haas debate, and it's like a trip. Anyway, sorry.
And this is like another issue, is that it's like it feels so American centric to disentangle like the European Union with realism, because we have like 30 states within Europe. Those states are doing their own thing, so they are not fueled by realism at all in the first place. That's why realism didn't pan out in the first place. They are fueled by a lot of different things. The reason why North Macedonia is not part of the European Union is because it has like contested claims with Bulgaria about something stupid, you know. And it's not that Bulgaria thought, from a realist perspective, we cannot let North Macedonia join.
Yeah. It's obvious European countries don't follow realist principles, especially between each other. It's like the ideals of cooperation, the European Union, except random historical bullshit, especially in Central Europe.
Yeah,
the Balkans. One thing I'd also like to point out, which I fully agree on, is a huge failure of the like mainstream like Mearsheimer realist interpretation of events, which I've seen mostly repeated by like pro-Russian trolls, is the idea that
just gonna get my tea.
Yeah.
Just
okay.
But I can still
you can hear. Okay. Is this idea that NATO acts just as the same? Like you point out that the EU acts as every single country acts independently. There is this prevalent idea which baffles me, according to which NATO acts unanimously, which maybe was true in large part and during the Cold War, but ever since the end of the Cold War, we wouldn't be having those discussions about Germany with Nord Stream 2, how basically Germany, Italy, and France have been more or less cooperating with Russia over the past 20 years instead of aligning with the US, etc., etc. We wouldn't be having those discussions if NATO actually was a bloc. But NATO isn't a bloc. It's especially since the end of the Cold War, the countries do not act with a common foreign policy, and it's insane to because I've seen people like Hassan or other lefties say like joining NATO is getting vassalized by the US or some insane bullshit like that, which maybe is kind of like a really extreme realist view of what it means to be a part of NATO. Like maybe we can say that if we through this like whole power dynamics interpretation of everything, but it's just wrong. It's just plain wrong. That's not how the reality works.
Yeah, the reality is more along the lines of like interconnectivity, in my opinion, where nations like build off each other when they cooperate with each other. So that's generally like my opinion when it comes to like these talks. Like the reason why we don't invade like Belgium as the Netherlands is because we do a lot of trade with those motherfuckers. You know, we engage. We have like the same. We have like certain institutions that protect us together. So within that, NATO is within that interconnectivity. But it's like if NATO wasn't there, we had like more reasons to be not nice to each other. So
I don't know. You have some pretty good blood and soil arguments for Belgium. Okay, those Flemish people have got it coming.
We will stop at the French border because I heard they had nukes. But yeah. So, but it just overall, I think like interconnectivity is like a way better like explainer of like why things go the way they go than compared to like realism, because realism is like addressing anything, and then within realism you can even make the argument to say like interconnectivity is like something that's important. So everything falls under this, like everything can be argued with realism. So and that's why I don't use it. So,
I guess we can make the argument I was making earlier about Ukraine from a interconnectivity perspective. I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you mean by interconnectivity, but Ukraine was connected to Russia, and Russia wanted to fight to keep control over its connection to Ukraine instead of having it connected to the rest of the world, or the Western world more specifically. But I agree. Like that's why also even though China is an adversary to like the U.S. and NATO, China, because China is so interconnected with the U.S. and all the other big economies in the world, it's just not the it just doesn't have the same interactions as say Russia has or North Korea has. To take an even more extreme example with the U.S. It's much more the power dynamics. The fighting is much more subtle and much less decisive. I guess obviously much less decisive with Russia fucking declaring war on the country. But
yeah. I think also another thing is that if you go off like that, the argument of like security threat and that kind of stuff, then like obviously like the US is like a security threat for China, but they're still trading with them. So what's going on there? You know, explain me that. So and then it's like, well, I will within my own reasoning of realism, I will calculate the trade that was also like a security threat. And so now I'm splitting hairs, right? So again, that's why I don't use it. But
yeah, and then you can like loop back. I really insist when it comes to trying to understand why obviously I don't want to anthropomorphize countries, but when it comes to trying to understand why a human being does something, human beings are black boxes. It's very complicated. You can't know their intentions. You can only guess at them. And then when it comes to why a country makes decisions, it's still a group of human beings that is doing things. So I feel like this human principle applies also to the government, where it's maybe easier. Like we can at some point uncover archives of old documents showing like meetings between the leaders of a country, and then we know the real reasons why they made this and that decision. But that's like 50 years down the line. We want to know until then, for sure.
Yeah, but if you go down that road, and let's say I'm like a super right-wing dude or something, and I'm gonna explain the world from the past and the current days, right? I can use realism to justify my reasoning about like things that happened in the past. It's pretty easy. Like I can always bring up that it's like a security like issue, or was like it's like you can even post out like reason stuff that isn't like true at all, and that's being facilitated by realism. There's a reason why these right-wing pundits use realism. There's a reason why lefties and tankies, like tankies in particular, use realism to justify their reasoning, because it's like a tool that can be used in any way, shape.
I think to a certain extent, I agree. It definitely seems to be. My understanding of realism is that it is trying to interpret all geopolitical relationships as pure power dynamics, which you already brought up several times, the issue with quantifying the power dynamics, like what you call like putting weights on different things. I would call it like quantifying the power, the different forms of power, because obviously there are different forms of power. And they aren't all equivalent, and it's hard to quantify most of them, honestly. It also has the convenience when it comes to like the people you're mentioning, like far right, tankies. It has the added convenience for those people of being kind of amoral, where it's just you have a goal, which usually is to have your country dominate, and you don't have to care about any moral considerations, any kind of everything's fair game, because you're completely detached from the actual human consequences of anything you do. You're just fighting for power, which is like that, which is pretty like evil to almost a certain extent. If that's like the way everything. All interactions are going to happen. Now, the only problem then is that, well, some countries do seem to interact that way.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that black box that you were saying, like that black box thing. So would you go ahead and assume like their reasoning, or would you just go off on what their reasoning is? Because I'm more like looking at like the denazification claims. Are those legit? They aren't. So the whole invasion is illegitimate. So that's generally how I do things, and I'm not bringing up, well, we have this thing in the past of like they have like ties and with Russia, and so
yeah,
so
I mostly look at claims. Yeah.
So I don't need to put in like the black box. I don't need to have to speculate about that.
No, you're still speculating. You're still speculating because, like you just said, for example, the official reason is denazification, but they lied. It's pretty clear they're lying about that. But if they lie about that, they can lie about anything. They like when I earlier cited Putin talking in his in the interview about NATO bases. And when I asked like what was Putin LARPing, I was kind of memeing because I had presented several arguments for this, but honestly, yes, maybe he was just LARPing. Maybe he was just setting up like propaganda, agitprop for to support the fact that he's a poor victim of NATO and etc. So he can then do anything, and a bunch of tankies will like suck his cock. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. All I can do, and all you can do, and all anyone can do, is look at what those people are saying, and look at what they're doing, and look at what they have said, and look at what they have done. Though obviously the more recent things are more important because people can change their minds, can change their perspectives. But still, it's not just post hoc reasoning to look at history, to look at what the previous politicians have said, what current politicians have said in the past. You try to take all that and see if there's a consistency to it, a consistent thought pattern to it, and if there is, you can make an argument that that thought pattern that fits the actions is the actual intention. Now, there could be several thought patterns that fit the intent, what's happened, and there are actually. There are, because we like a lot of people have pointed out, for example, that Chechnya did not have any, was not getting closer to Western interests. Georgia was very. There was like some vague talks of maybe joining the EU, but it was very like it wasn't nothing real with it.
Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but the NATO talking point is ridiculous, because they would have still invaded Ukraine if they went their own way without joining the EU or NATO. So that's
it's a bit complicated.
I genuinely don't think that is a concern for Russia overall. I don't think that NATO was the straw. It was.
I don't
want to get that land.
Maybe they definitely wanted the land. Once again, I think it's impossible to deny that there's like the oil deposits around Crimea, the eastern Ukraine is very rich as well, etc., etc. But the allegory you just made, I think, isn't very useful, because there is no such thing as a pro-Western or even a neutral democratic government in Ukraine post 2014 that is not pro-EU when the will of the people was pro-EU. So there's no dissociating a non-pro-Russian government and Ukraine starting the process to join the EU. Now, NATO is a whole other can of worms, but Ukraine was going to join the EU, and so this hypothetical of Ukraine has like a non-pro-Russian government but doesn't join the EU, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm talking about like a counterfactual, right? So
yeah.
It's like it's kind of silly arguing that, but it is like, if you were to say like Ukraine overall being independent is like a loss for Russia overall, right? So that's why they went in. It doesn't necessarily have to do with NATO. It doesn't necessarily have to with the EU. Again, it has to do with like interconnectivity. So it has to do with like all those little baby steps to being more independent, right? That's what's like problematic, because it disentangles like the relationships between Russia and Ukraine. And
I agree.
Makes relationships with the EU and NATO and whatever, but it's not. Again, you cannot justify it by saying, "Well, was NATO or was EU or."
Just that justification I don't even want to address, but being said, like what we're describing, the whole like baby steps to independence, the problem there is that there is a very real there's like full equivalency between the reasoning you just gave from like an interconnectivity perspective. It's completely equivalent to the realist reasoning of my vassal is getting further away from me, and I need to step in to like retake that power I had over them.
Can be used
but the difference here is that you can place like realism or you can place interconnectivity as a way to justify your realism. So, but the other way around doesn't work. So it's like so realism can explain so many things. Like, because it's like a theory that compasses everything in the world, that it explains everything. Whenever you are right or wrong, it just explains it, because it's not.
Well, that's something I don't buy. Like I don't think it explains everything, and I think we've pointed out a lot of fields where it doesn't explain what happens.
But that's the issue, because if it can explain everything, it's not. It's like, I'm bringing up the science, but a theory that explains everything is not really. It's not really a theory, first of all, but it's like
it cannot be falsified, right? Yeah,
that's the issue there.
that's a problem with how people apply it, not necessarily with the ideas themselves. It's something people do very often. They stumble upon a theory that is intellectually pleasing to them, and then they try to explain the entire world with it. Their application of the theory is flawed, but someone who's more enlightened, when they encounter a model of the world, they understand that the model is always an imperfect approximation of the world, and that it abandons certain aspects of the world to focus on other aspects of the world to explain those more easily, right?
Yeah, but that's like why I wouldn't like use it, because it can be used by everybody however they see fit.
Well, so can any theory. That's not a flaw specific to realism.
No, but I think in this specific reasoning, like overall, when your theory gets like more narrow, and when your theory becomes more narrow to explain something, it's a better theory overall, because you can falsify it. If you cannot falsify a theory, overall, it's just a bad theory, because you have no way to know if the theory is right or wrong.
Yes,
or the IDs. And that's my issue with realism overall. But yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's it's like we're almost arguing. I don't want to say a straw man, because I feel like Mearsheimer honestly does this a bit of like taking his theory and just applying it to the entire world. I think he genuinely does that, so it's not a straw man per se. Like the people actually do, like even like the people who are supposed to know better, they actually do that. But I want to say I know the way I view theories personally is like tools in the toolbox. If I need to screw something in and I start banging it with a hammer and you call me an idiot, like yeah, you're right, I'm being an idiot. And so like realism is that hammer. I shouldn't be using it on anything other than nails, but there are nails out in the world. Does that make sense to you?
So, okay, I will try it in a different way then. If like you have this like pond, I was talking about that earlier. You have this pond with swans, and you have this way of like doing science where every swan that comes into the pond that's white proves your theory, right? So if your theory is like every swan is white, so you're trying to go by confirmation. This is what realism is doing, trying to get that confirmation over and over. Every swan that comes into the pond, right, is like confirming your theory. But now a black swan comes into the pond, right? It doesn't confirm your theory. So you're ignoring the swan, the black swan. If you go from another angle, if you're going from the falsification angle, right? If that one black swan comes into the pond, you need to get a new theory. Your theory is wrong, right?
Yes.
So that's basically what I'm doing. So and that's why I take offense with like with Mearsheimer or realism overall.
Yeah.
I think it's like it's a really sad theory. You can explain like all those white swans, but your theory is never. It's on a basic level wrong.
Well, yeah, but like what I'm saying is that there is no such thing as an all-encompassing theory. Like you pointed out very appropriately that it failed to explain the development of the EU and even some NATO behavior. But if we go like in the past, there is a part of U.S. policy that is very realist in its nature, which is the Monroe Doctrine, for example. That was brought up at the last Lib Praxis. I think that one, if you it was clearly a realist thought in U.S. politics. That doesn't mean that all U.S. politics are realist, and that doesn't mean that even other policies from the same time are realist. But that policy was.
Yeah. So to say that people are acting in realism, I wouldn't deny that, but I would deny that you can explain like the past, the present, and the future with realism.
Yes, you cannot explain everything with a single tool. I agree with that. I
So,
never claimed the opposite, honestly.
So yeah, that overall, when you talk about like a tool, I think realism is like in its own perspective. Realism, people that believe in realism overall think it's a tool that you can do anything with. So, and I think
that is a problem. I
that's
agree.
a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I don't use it. I leave it. I just throw it away because it's like it feels like a conspiracy. like
I understand that, but to take like another example, I had that issue with I know IRL. I've had that issue with like first year psychology or first year sociology students. They usually have it's like a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. It's like they only know this one way of understanding human behavior, and they're like they want to explain everything with it. They've like read one book of Freud, one book of Lacan, and they're like, now I understand everything. And I feel like
thinking,
that's, yeah.
I got this book that I read, and like it's about like philosophy of science, and they specifically bring up Freud. That people are so like, because Freud's ideas can explain everything. Like, oh, you're having a bad day. Oh, you had some issues with your mommy, right? So that's like what Freud is doing, and that's why Freud overall is not really good, because a theory that again can explain everything is not a good theory overall, because you cannot find out if it's true or not. Like, you cannot falsify it.
But then when you look at the history of psychology, there is this like quote from Carl Jung, where he says that he like people often see Carl Jung like Jungian psychology as opposed to Freudian psychology, but Jung was who, like an actual mature therapist, in an interview said that for 1/3 of his patients he used like traditional Freudian techniques, for 1/3 he used his own like Jungian interpretation, and for another third he had to improvise. He didn't have like a clear model that fit the interactions with those people. The reason I bring this up is because, like I was saying earlier, people who actually understand like you're saying, the philosophy of science and the issues with the issues with having models of the world, they understand that you need all sorts of different models, right?
Yeah. So what Mr. Geek actually like he actually answered like one tweet of Jay Chow, where he said like, this is masturbating, intellectual masturbating, and I think that's honestly, he couldn't be more correct on that either, because of the fact that you can only use this tool if you are already like super smart. So nobody can engage with this topic unless they are already super smart. And who's the arbiter of being smart? Nobody is. So it's.
Can you link me the Jay Chow tweet? I think I missed that interaction. But yeah,
I think he might deleted it because of the fact that Danabo said something about it, but I don't know.
But okay, that doesn't matter. I understand that too. Like the problem with there is such a thing as intellectual masturbation, and like that can be a fair criticism as well. I think if you want to have this like it's like this thing they that said, when you want to teach something like a complex subject, that if you can't make the explanation simple enough for the people that you're trying to teach, then you probably don't understand the topic as well as you think you do. Like or to put in other words, if you want to have that like highbrow super intellectual approach, The onus is still on you to find the right way to communicate it, and if it's communicated wrongly, that's on you. Yeah, that's like a perfectly valid criticism.
Yeah. So I don't like. Is it like if you can explain it, or if you can't explain it in an easy way?
I'm saying if you can't explain it in a way
Yeah.
where that's not intellectual masturbation, then you probably need to put more thought into it and like get a better understanding of how to communicate your ideas, because it's like, especially on a platform like Twitter, because obviously there you can't write a fucking book on Twitter.
Yeah, that's also like being like very optical is like important on Twitch, Twitter.
Yeah.
Being like a content creator, that means that you shouldn't use realism overall. Stop using it, guys. So yeah, that's just my point. It's like it's a dumb argument. Like we can boil down everything to security concerns. It doesn't mean they don't exist, but again, Zelensky is looking buff today, so he might pose more of a threat than he did yesterday. So I'm going into the absurdism. I know that. I'm being hyperbolic. I know that, but I do it for a reason. So yeah.
The one problem I do have as well, because like earlier I conceded, like, okay, maybe I shouldn't use realism as an explanation of the like all this stuff I talked about earlier. The problem is that for those words also have a useful meaning. Like if I am talking about this theory of like spheres of influence and perceiving all other influences as adversaries and power dynamics, etc., rather than every time having to like do this long sentence, I can just say the realist approach, and that is actually useful in communication as well.
Yeah, I doubt that. Like I was thinking about like bringing up like vegetarianism, and then bring up the fact all the time that Hitler was also like a vegetarian. Like it's missing the point. It's kind of why are you bringing Hitler up? You know, that's how I feel about it.
I do not get that analogy at all.
No, so yeah, so I'm gonna talk about vegetarianism. You know, Hitler was also like a vegetarian. So what am I saying here? Like what am I saying here? Like, and that's a bit with realism. It's like this is what this and that happened is like the realist approach or something. It's like well, the realists are generally just fucking wrong. So why bring them up? So I don't see the utility in that. So like bringing up the wrong theory to
you can bring them up as a descriptor of something, is what I was saying.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't see the utility in that.
Because
do you understand that?
I understand that you're saying that you don't see the utility in it, but I still see a utility in it. If we're talking, for example, one area which one area where I would probably go back to you talking about realism is in the dynamics of nuclear powers, for example. We want to have more idealistic approaches when it comes to geopolitics, more international cooperation, more rule of law, etc., etc. But what we see right now is that when a nuclear power with mutually assured destruction capability acts, we have to drop all, well, not all, but we have to tread with caution, and we like. If it was any other country doing this to Ukraine, that was not a nuclear power, like the US and half of Europe would be directly at war with them. There would be like a no-fly zone. There would be like all sorts of direct military intervention. And I don't know how else to describe this approach, which is to, like, we would like to do this, but the reality of power prevents us from doing that, other than realism. I feel like that's the correct descriptor of that part of this conflict, for example.
I don't think like that description doesn't hold up once we are capable to have defense systems against like nukes or something.
Yeah, so that's a hypothetical. That's not the reality right now.
We are working on it. So, but
yeah, and they're not efficient enough. Like sure, like in the science fiction world where we have anti-nuke defenses, yes, but I'm talking about now.
Yeah, but that's why the future, we cannot predict that with realism. So we cannot predict that.
Yeah, yeah. But
so we can only like talk about the present and the past. Again.
Yeah, but I'm yeah, sure, and that's why I'm saying there's still a use for the word realism. All I said is how else am I supposed to describe the fact that we choose not to intervene in Ukraine directly?
Yeah.
Like, is there another word for it, or do I have to every single time explain? Well, there's mutually assured destruction. We don't want nuclear war, even though we don't want to let Russia invade Ukraine. Do I have to go through that explanation every single time? Or I probably yes, because it's Twitch and like who knows who's listening. So I actually do have to go through the explanation every single time. But I do like
stop debating against yourself, Nate. So.
But I mean, like on a panel when I'm talking with someone who knows what we're talking about, or in a discussion, it's useful to have a word where we know it means all those things. You know what I mean? Even if it's not a predictor of future behavior, it's still a descriptor of present or past behavior.
Yeah, and that being said, it can be used to view the world in all the way senses that you are thinking about it. So if you have like again a Nazi or somebody will say that why are these nations failing? It's because of black people. Just look at history; it explains things. So they will like use realism in that sense. So I don't necessarily think it's even like a good way to describe like the past and the current like.
Well, it depends like, on how you use it. You can use it in like that batshit insane way, or you can try to collect arguments that actually support a coherent point of view.
That's why I don't try to allude to it or try to bring it up, because I think that overall, again, it's like also with Twitch chats and that kind of stuff. People see that in like a different way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, with the whole like dynamic of streaming on Twitch and etc. It's definitely safer to like explain things again and again. Do you mind if I read what Elysium wrote? I see he addressed me a message in your chat.
Go ahead, because I think he's alluding to the same issue that I have with it.
Okay, so. I'm curious how Name would feel comparing this to people viewing things from a Marxist framework. If something has failed to give accurate interpretation, but you can fit some things into it, won't it still give you a poor understanding / predictive capability? No, exactly. It just... Well, when it comes to the Marxist framework, for example, this is actually something I argue. I do think that there are things that the Marxist framework can inform you. You can choose not to use it to try to not to use like material reality to try to explain everything, but there are certain aspects of human behavior, of societal behavior, that will be more informed if you interpret them through a Marxist lens. And there are other theories too. Like the last thing I want to advocate for is like myopic, trying to go for a myopic understanding of the world. But now the predictive capability will be perhaps relatively poor if that's the only theory you use. If you use various different theories and understand their strengths and limitations, then your predictive capability will go up. That's what I have to say about like using a Marxist framework.
Yeah, I can.
It has its place
And
too.
I can understand the use for using bad theories, but overall, I think that
There's no such thing as bad theories. We're talking about the philosophy of science.
There are bad theories.
I know
Disproven theories, or like theories that are just not encompassing, like that they are fallible,
you're right.
and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
there are bad theories, but what I mean is like it does still happen, but it is rare that there are completely bad models. A good example for me would be an analogy with physics. Newton had a model of how gravity worked. His theory was bad. It was proven incorrect, but his model, his mathematical equations, were correct at a certain scale. It's just that later, when Einstein developed relativity, he developed more precise equations that are much more complex, and work at much larger scales. So you can still use Newton's equations, and in fact, in like 99% of applications, they will be precise enough for whatever you're trying to do. And then there are those further cases where you need to use the more precise model.
Yeah,
now that's not an exact analogy of how it works with like sociology or economic theories, but that's kind of how I like see this whole toolbox perspective of like I actually want to understand, like have the like material Marxist interpretation of like I want to know. I think his interpretation, for example, of the French Revolution is interesting. The fact that he interpreted it as the growing middle class of merchants overthrowing finding themselves in a power struggle with the aristocrats and weaponizing the lower class in order to overthrow the aristocrats and then lead the country. It is perhaps a bit myopic. There are other things at play. But to completely ignore it and say like, oh no, Marx was proven wrong, there's nothing true in it, is myopic to me too. I think there's value in understanding those interpretations.
I think when a theory becomes more narrow, it becomes more precise. I think it's more a valuable theory. So when we talk about like some physics, like people that got like stuff right in the past, but not for 100%, I think we can all say, well, these things are outdated. These things we don't use to describe like the whole world anymore. So we have some nuance. We found some nuance. So, and that's why I for that 0.1%, I wouldn't use it, like the theory, because it's not encompassing, like it's outdated. So I wouldn't because I'm like a bit mean, right? Saying that, well, it's a bad theory or it's a flawed theory, or like I'm doing it on like a higher level, like I'm more angry, right, or something. But it still holds up what I say. So it sounds a little bit mean, but it's like if it's outdated, we should probably not use it that for a certain specific reason, right? And I think with realism, it's so encompassing of the whole world. Well, it has been falsified a million different times. For me, yeah, there's no utility in using a tool that's like basically a rock to do some rocket science or something. You know, we are using rocks when we're trying to build a rocket ship with realism. That's how I look at realism as a tool.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm not convinced. That said, I do grant that the only thing you've really changed my mind on is that perhaps I should like use it less as a label when it comes to optics and streaming or on Twitter or whatever, and try to be clear about what exactly it is I'm advancing. But honestly, like in the disagreements I ended up in with like, well, I guess was mostly with Mr. Geek, I don't think I even used the term realism. Maybe I did. Maybe I shouldn't have. I don't remember actually what I tweeted. It was 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
Sorry.
I tweeted out also something about like Mearsheimer,
Yeah.
and saying that it's like it's not factually incorrect something, because again you can put everything underneath realism, so you can have like an extremely like liberal perspective on realism, and but it's like, come on guys, it's that's not generally, that's not how you do, like, that's you can explain everything, right? It's not that, then it's not useful for me, at least. And that's why I
Yeah.
don't generally like advocate for it or talk about it in the positive way.
Like you understand,
Especially if like
sorry.
Mearsheimer, especially when we talk about Mearsheimer, which I just generally think is a dipshit, to be honest, because of the fact that the way he talks about Europe, he thinks we are all racist and like people that will fight over. He generally, I think he is like a advocator of like the nation state with his reasoning, because that he thinks like multiculturalism is like bad as well. I
Really?
assume. Yeah,
Oh, you assume.
I assume because of the fact that he says like, well, these nation states are going to war, and like bringing up like that kind of stuff. So I think his whole framework of realism got adjusted today to fit all those liberal notions that he doesn't agree with. So that's why he changed up his position, because he was in the corner, right? So yeah, sorry. I just, that's why I don't like him.
I understand it, and like that's something that pisses me off with him too. Like at the end of the day, well like earlier, I know you're not like strawmanning me.
Yeah,
but
I'm
just
not
like,
saying that you believe in.
Yeah, I know, but it just like boils down to the fact that yeah, I'm not. And I would love to be called out on it if I start like using this like one single theory to try to explain everything or whatever. Like, yeah, do call me out on it, because I would need to get a reality check. It's something I really try not to do, honestly.
So my issue is like, if you are going to like talk about like realism, like people that will be like being shown up is also like Mearsheimer. So you will get feed like Mearsheimer propaganda, which is like factually like not true. And then we have like this whole nuanced like debate, right, about like using it in like an effective or like a positive way, like what you're saying. But I think that's not the reality. No, people will go in and think about like realism, and then get fat spoon by what Mearsheimer thinks as well. So it's
Yeah,
like,
that's a fair concern.
I mean, it's also with like, again, my analogy with like Hitler. Hitler was a vegetarian, which is like a good thing. But I wouldn't advocate to look up vegetarian or Hitler because of vegetarianism, right? That's not how I do things. Like, I think it's optical is like it's a big L, right?
That's a terrible analogy. That actually, that analogy completely deserves your argument. I could make the analogy that since Hitler was a vegetarian, everyone who just as me talking about realism means I push people towards Mearsheimer, anyone who advocates for vegetarianism gets pushed towards Hitler. That's the argument you're making.
No,
thank you for giving me. Thank you for giving me a counter argument.
It's bringing up Adolf Hitler as like it's like not it's arguing for Adolf Hitler instead of arguing for vegetarianism. That's my concern. I think if you of course, if you bring up like vegetarianism, you're not going to talk about like, well, look at this dude called Hitler. He was also a vegetarian, right? But like with Mearsheimer, he cannot escape realism without Mearsheimer. So it's a little bit different in that sense, right? So I think you will inexplicably get fed like those talking points. And first, when I came into the politics sphere, I was so confused by all these weird ass talking points about like politics within the EU. And now I completely understand where they're coming from. They're coming from this one dude and like I was so confused, like talking about Europe as like these nations that are always in conflict till this day, which is not true. So they, yeah, it just
Yeah, what you just said is fair. Like definitely, especially when the intersection of like talking about Ukraine and Russia and realism, you then obviously do end up with Mearsheimer. I think that's a fair point.
Also with Ukraine overall, when you talk about like realism and his like quote based on like why it's the US's fault, I think that's like also like all overall is just wrong because of the reasoning that if it was to argue that, right, it means that Ukraine overall was not having the intention of joining NATO. It was not having the intention of joining the EU. Then overall, that's what Mearsheimer is like saying, because he says like it's Ukraine. It's basically Ukraine wanted to join NATO. So if you're gonna talk about like whose fault it is, it's either Russia or Ukraine. It's not. It's not the US that is to blame for what's going on in Ukraine. It's just a weird argument, and that's again Mearsheimer from his like American perspective, thinking that everything is about the US and that we live still in the 1930s where nation states were having the upper hand. Yeah, extremely harmful. Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to think about it if I think I do agree in general that that his perspective is harmful in certain ways. I just don't know if it's like apart from not mentioning realism, I guess I don't know what else I would have to change. Someone's asking me to comb my hair in chat. I don't know what to say. I like look, my hair is an autonomous independent region, okay? It's
Yeah.
There's a referendum where 96% of my hair wants to join the.
Yeah,
sorry, I guess
it might be something that we can talk about as well, like sovereignty and like self-determination. Because I think when it comes to optics, you in the past brought up like the region of Crimea wanted to become independent. And I think that's fair enough, but it's like it's no argument in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That and I've been careful to always say those two things together. Like every time I've brought up the pre-Russian referendums in Crimea, fuck the one from 2014, but the pre-Russian referendums and polls in Crimea, they open an interesting discussion on, like you said, self-determination of a part of a country, etc., etc. But they in no way can be used as a justification for what happened. It would be like, I don't know, like Italy invading Corsica because there's like Corsican independence, like Corsican independence movement. It would be fucking insane. There's no logic or precedent in diplomacy or in international law where it works that way.
Yeah. So what would you think if you run down the logic of having like self-determination over like sovereignty? Like what would happen then? Because I know the answer, but
self-determination over sovereignty, you mean self-determination of the region over the sovereignty of the country?
Yeah. If that became like a precedent, what would happen?
Balkanization. You have countries splitting up into like smaller and smaller pieces, and more complex like regional how to put it, tensions over like resources that are no longer shared by a bigger country, but instead like one region got the coal, the other region got the coast. Now they're fighting, or like there's tensions. Like there are very good arguments and against Balkanization. It literally comes from the Balkans, where a war happened because of those kinds of tensions. But this is like a whole other subject, but for me, it's one of those things that really need to be judged on a case-by-case basis, because like I really like bringing up the example of Somaliland. Somaliland is an actual functional country within a country that because the international community has this phobia of Balkanization ever since the historical events, it just doesn't get any recognition.
I just want to say that I understand that you need to look at it from case by case basis, but overall I don't think it's like a precedent that we should set. Like, it's like having a referendum on like leaving a country, unless that country allows that, shouldn't be enough for a country to be independent. I think that's overall like a good argument to have, because otherwise your nation could collapse anytime if that becomes like an overall precedent. And that's why it's also why I would say, like, overall I don't think that Crimea deserves like necessarily to be independent of Ukraine, because that's not how international politics work. You cannot have a referendum and then it's just an independent country, you know?
Yeah. So first, I want to drop a meme on you. Would you still be saying this if you were still going out with that girl who was for Scottish independence?
Well,
I forgot her name. I'm sorry.
By the way, I dated. I had like one date with her too.
Oh, so, okay. I thought you dated for a bit longer.
No. But that being said, like, I think it's the reason why I was thinking about the Scottish referendum as well, but they have like means of getting there. So they have like a nation built on like that you can actually exit the union. So they have put that in place. If like Groningen in the Netherlands is going to have that referendum as well, we don't have that in our nation. Also, overall, if you the whole thing about sovereignty is that you cannot leave the country. That's the thing. That's the meme of sovereignty. So
yeah, I know. Okay, you bring up a fair point about Scotland being its own, like having its own. I guess we can call it sovereignty in a certain way. That being said, I don't know. I do like recently the I brought up Corsica too, because I don't know if you've heard, but the Corsican independence movement has recently been stepping up again. They've asked for the liberation of some like past criminals and terrorists, and they've asked for concessions from the French government. And Macron actually has opened the negotiation table with them. They might be getting like a bit of more autonomous region type deal, while still being part of France. Some like compromise, which and I see Bookie in your chat also is like talking about how like Quebec negotiated with Canada. I think in general, like in like mature democracies, you probably want to have that happen, like around a negotiation table peacefully, find like compromises where the separatists can be happy, but also keep like a united country.
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't always have like the positive effect that you want, but that being said, like, yeah, of course people can advocate for independence and all that stuff, so I'm not gonna argue with that. And I'm just that overall, I'm not bringing up like when it comes to Crimea, I'm kind of like bringing up that referendum alludes to it, that they can have their own independent like nation from Ukraine or from Russia. I think overall that's just not really the case, and the referendum overall doesn't mean that much. I do understand that the people want to become independent, but just from more sovereignty like argument, because again, run down the whole idea of like self-determination above like sovereignty, and you will have a shit show.
It's a complicated subject. Like it's People tend to minimize it far too much on kind of both sides of it when it comes to the Ukraine situation, where like Western media doesn't address at all the fact that there was an actual genuine separatist movement, which is understandable. Honestly, it's like not that important to what's happening right now, like we just discussed. But also like then the Russians like completely weaponized it, and it's like none of those perspectives are correct if we go into the details.
And if we go back to weaponizing arguments, I think realism is definitely like weaponized by Russia at this point, because it's like their go-to like argument. So because it's like, well, it's a security concern because in the past they aligned with us, and
yes,
they're NATO and they are Russians. So
even though I still think that they're genuine with it, I 100% agree with you that they've weaponized it as well.
Do you actually think that they are genuine concerned by Ukraine joining the West as for in a means of like defensive capabilities? Do you think
the defensive capabilities? No. Okay. It was more from the perspective of like I described earlier, the whole sphere of influence thing, where my interpretation is, and once again, like it could be completely wrong, but my interpretation is Russia viewed Ukraine as a vassal state, kind of like Belarus is a vassal state, and it wanted to. And so it's not that Ukraine will like have NATO bases and then those NATO bases will like shoot missiles at Russia. That's not going to happen. It's rather that Russia had Ukraine and it was going to lose Ukraine. Yeah. And so it acted to try to keep as much of Ukraine as it could keep.
I understand that, but when people utter the words like security concerns.
Yeah, they're talking about NATO missiles. Yeah,
they're talking about missiles. So again,
you don't
nuance is lost in the conversation. Then,
and that you're right. Like that's something that I should probably be careful about when it comes to when it comes to like the phrase security concerns. I probably should find like a different way of expressing this.
Yeah. You got an interesting chatter.
Yeah, I was focused on discussion. I don't like to reading chat too much while talking with someone, but holy shit, those paragraphs, dude.
So yeah, I was talking about this like another time. I was talking about like the fact that when I looked at the politics section again, right, that there suddenly were so many like Russian like streamers, which was like quite interesting. And after that, suddenly like Twitch was rolling out misinformation bans. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I see some connection there. It's like a little bit conspiratorial for me to say so, but.
Are you gonna get me banned? Is that what this is about? This is my last chance to redeem myself.
No, I'm doing the conspiracy that I say like maybe they rolled it out because of the Russian streamers that suddenly were getting like millions of views within the politics section.
The reality is, if they actually enacted their misinformation policy, Haas would be banned.
Yeah. So if you wanna look up like a nice debate, Haas and Stardust had a debate.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And he basically said like, yeah, I believe the what is it, the World Health Organization, the WHO.
Yeah.
I believe them because he couldn't bring himself to say that he doesn't believe them because he was scared of getting banned. So yeah.
Damn.
It's interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, because during the Destiny Dylan Haas Hinkle debate, he was like full on American biolabs are making genetically engineered viruses to kill all Slavic people. That was like he was actually unironically claiming that.
Like the issue I have, and I don't understand how Destiny is capable of doing that, is like refuting those insane claims. So if I was in a conversation where somebody brought up suddenly like something like that, I would be stun locked, to be fair, because I would be like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Are you
Yeah.
What is this? So yeah.
Yeah, if I wasn't prepared, it would be really hard for me too. Actually, when I saw that, I did a bunch of research on it, and if I had to talk with someone who was doing like that bullshit now, I actually know exactly what I would tell them. I would talk about the I would talk about the core of truth that's at the center of the conspiracy theory, because there is like a kernel of truth in the middle of it, which is the DoD. Maybe you heard me talk about it already the other day. But
it's like a science lab that investigates like pathogens or like
but what's interesting is even further than that. So the DoD has partnerships with hundreds of labs across the world, including Ukraine, including Kazakhstan, there's one of their flagship labs in the same program. The program with Ukraine started in 2005 when there was the Yanukovych in power. It wasn't under Zelensky. And like, so once you start collecting like all the actual evidence, okay, the DoD has partnerships with labs in pro-Russian governments. They're probably not developing American bioweapons in like pro-Russian vassal states.
Yeah, but the issue is then if you refute that one, then it's like a Gershgallop. And I talked with this with like Bookie earlier on, like about like misinformation. You can refute the one thing, but the guy goes home and reads more like misinformation, and he comes back with 2 more of those talking points. Bookie has like a Russian family, and he tries to rebuttal the source of the news. So his argument is more about like going to the source and disprove the source itself. And I think that's effective when it comes to Russian propaganda. When it comes to Chinese propaganda, however, I would more have your approach. So more of like, but obviously, like in a debate, you gotta have like a rebuttal. But when you talk about like just normal people engaging with each other, I think it's more effective what he does than in that case for Russian propaganda. So yeah, just yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I just like the topic because I did the research. I read like fucking DoD PDFs they put out online of like what they're doing. Saw maps of what labs they're working with. And it's just not the right place to look for some insane U.S. conspiracy. That it just doesn't work if you look at the facts. But I understand that may like be a hard message to pass as well. Sorry, I cut you.
No, I think that overall that you do the research for stream is like responsible, because obviously if there's somebody in your chat that brings up that dumb shit take, you can refute it. Was because we got downlocked the other day by the dude that said like Ukraine and Russia doesn't have a border. You remember that?
Yeah,
like,
I remember that.
So we were all like confused by that, and then I thought about it later more, and the dude is comparing Taiwan to Ukraine as like still part of the Russian Empire.
Yeah,
I thought that, but it took a while to realize that. So and then at that point you already seem you lost, right? So yeah.
It was such a dumb argument that even if I didn't have like an actual response to it. Just so what, like the Schengen space, you know, now every country can take over every other country. Like it doesn't fucking make sense. But yeah, so like I still had a response to that in the moment, comparing it to the Schengen space. But yeah, like obviously if they're in the situations where you don't have the response, it can be hard.
Yeah, no, and I can. Yeah, understand people that get like stun locked by that kind of shit. Yeah, we covered a lot. I think we are over it.
There wasn't enough banter. We were like getting into some spicy banter on Twitter. Where are the insults, Chinchilla? Why aren't you calling me like a collaborator?
You're just strawmanning me, man. Wait. Wait. Let me just one thing. Like, honestly, like Chow wanted to moderator. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I can talk with this dude without like having a moderator. And besides that, Chow would argue realism for you again. So So yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Chow,
I was afraid of that
not
too.
Gonna happen.
He came into the chat earlier. He wanted me to message him. I forgot to message him because he wanted to at least like listen to the convo. But yeah, no, I was a bit afraid that would happen too. That he would like it would become like an argument between you and him, or like a trilateral debate or something.
And at that point, I would just drag in Elysium. You know?
Yes, just do a little praxis. Just go.
So no, we covered a lot, and yeah, for me, it's always like I'm always also like just on personal level as like somebody that used to be in politics, I am concerned by optics a lot. So that's why I'm generally going hard on these kind of things. But yeah,
and that's fair, yeah. And I because like, but that's a weird. Okay, this is like a complete segue, but there is a paradox when it comes to Twitch politics. The more reactionary you are, the more spicy you are, the more drama you'll make, the more like clicks and views you'll get. But at the same time, you're like what we saw with Destiny. You like nuke your chances at IRL politics. If you have like a spicy past, there ideally there's like a balance to be found, but you can't be too tame either. You need to attract attention. You need to entertain people.
So if you still want to go into politics, I would just suggest that you avoid some topics. Like the Ukraine topic, how we consider it spicy, but from in the framework of like international politics, you can discuss those things.
Yeah.
If you're gonna discuss like incest or like trans rights, those things can just bite you in the ass in the future. I think that's
true. Yeah.
So you can still be spicy, but it's like certain topics. At least that's what I think. And that being said, like I'm not concerned with going into politics in the future anymore. So I think it's really annoying being a politician because you got to pretend that you know everything first of all, which I do. But that being said, you gotta know all the systems to have like effective change, which is like nearly impossible. So you're second guessing all the time. If you get caught that you don't know the system right enough, you're being considered a bad politician. So now you're in this dilemma of not knowing something. You want to learn it, but by learning it, you will get caught that you are stupid. So and that's like really like hard if you for like politicians like.
But
so yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Wait. Just one thing.
Wait.
No, but I feel like
Are you mad? Are you mad?
I feel like what politicians learn to compensate for that is the whole like stalling thing. I once saw this video from I think it was a French politician explaining how to like talk for 60 seconds without saying anything when responding to a question, so you have time to think and like have an actual answer. Or if you don't have an actual answer, you can like then try to like go into another subject, and then the journalist like looks like an asshole if they actually press you.
Yeah, no, it's it just overall, yeah, it's just weird. I don't like it. Like it's that being said, like you gotta. I think it's good if people go in politics, but it's like pretty hard to be effective as well as a politician. And if you're not going to be effective, then it's like kind of hard to consider politics overall. So in the case of like local politics, you got to know every institution before you go in local politics out. You can learn halfway. You can do that, but I wouldn't recommend that overall. Like, just because you don't want to get caught looking stupid. So, but yeah, that's. I don't want to dissuade people from going into local politics either. But yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Wait. I'm just thinking. You've talked with Turnit. He with his party, they actually had like local elections. He was on the list with the party he's been working with. But I don't remember if they like didn't win any seats or just if they he didn't get like if the list wasn't, if they didn't win enough seats for him to be on the in the government. But well, in any case, it didn't work out this election.
Yeah. So for him, I think it's more about activism, I would assume.
Yes,
that
yeah.
It's like obviously, like sometimes with some ideas you don't get that much traction, but if you can radicalize people in that sense, they will become more likely like you. So like Bernie Sanders, how he right tried to radicalize like the Democratic Party, which to a certain extent he was successful in, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that but if you are actually going into politics and you know you can be elected, then you sure yourself need to know what you're talking about and not talk about like just fake IDs or like
depends on what party you're
big IDs, and then if people question you about it, you don't know shit about it, because then you look really silly. So as a niche party, you get away with more shit, to be fair. So that's all I'm saying. But yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, I think we covered everything, right?
Yeah, we covered everything. I'm thinking at some point we should maybe have a discussion. I know. Maybe at some point, can I like interview you about local politics more, like what your experience was and stuff like that. Because like what we're talking about right now, I find really interesting.
I'm sorry, my whole agenda is full. Sorry, it's not possible. No, just sure, but go ahead.
I can get you on, but first I need to start making a realist interpretation of local politics, and then I'll get you to debate me.
Yes. Oh, so you went in politics because you saw that your own party was not doing good, so that was like a security concern for you.
Exactly.
Because I joined my party when it was at the 0 seats in the Netherlands, and now they're the second biggest party in the Netherlands. So
damn, should have stuck with them.
Look, every since I joined, it always goes better for that party. You know, I'm not making any assumptions, but just saying. You know,
if I make a party, I'll have you join. That's my key to success.
Yeah. Also, what is funny, because I became member when I was like 15 of that party, which was like really funny because of the fact that like when I was like 25, I already got like invited for Old Members Day, because I was 10 years member. So I didn't go to that meeting, but it would be funny as fuck because I would be like the one dude that's 25 between all these 80-year-old people. Which was quite interesting, but yeah.
You should go there and live stream it. Be like the IRL streamer at the boomer politician party.
I was actually like contemplating of like going to live stream near the on the side of Poland, of course, but near the border. I just interview people there. I was actually thinking about that.
Because I was thinking of going to Poland soon too, just to visit my family.
You want a free ride? That's what you're saying, right? No, just kidding.
I was thinking of taking the plane, but and actually I know people who have been working with to help the refugees there from Ukraine, though. I know, obviously, it's like it depends on the situation and your call. But I've actually talked with them about a bit about the whole like filming refugees stuff, where like they would be uncomfortable if they took me to like go on a humanitarian like mission by the border or whatever, and if I started filming or interviewing people, they wouldn't want me to do that, which I understand. But
your family?
Well, the people I know who are involved with helping out over there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I would assume that it's like good to bring more attention to it. So I think that it's like it really personalizes it, and I think it's like a good thing to do if people are interviewed and coming from, especially I think from Twitch or something like that. I think nobody is actually doing that. You have some Ukrainian streamers, but not like people going out there doing it for the politics section. So I think would be pretty good. Besides that,
I agree that those things actually do need to be documented and stuff. I know there's like good and bad ways of doing it too. I saw this clip of a journalist in Ukraine who was holding up a bus of refugees in I think it was in Mariupol, and she like the last person got on the bus, and she like runs up. The doors were like gonna close. She runs up, she stands in the doors, and she starts interviewing this dude. And everyone's in the bus is like, "No, get off, stop!"
But that's
like, no. I just have a question.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If you go on the side of Poland, that's where people are already safe.
Yeah, so people are already safe.
If you go into Ukraine, you are a dipshit because you are a security concern for your own nation, in the sense that if you get bombed to smithereens, now they might have like an international crisis on their hands, right? Like if an American dies on their soil, it's like different than a Ukrainian, because now an American is involved. Besides you are holding people up when. So think overall that going into Ukraine is just it's a bad idea. It's a dumb idea, not just for yourself, but also for everything that's geopolitical. So,
and geopolitically, it's more or less okay. I mean, like journalists die during wars. That doesn't trigger like escalation. But I get what you mean. I think when it comes on the Polish side of the border or on the Romanian side of the border, wherever, it's all where the responsible portrayal comes in is like respecting the fact that you're filming people or interacting with people probably at one of the worst moments of their lives. Like not being pushy, respecting their privacy, or if they don't want to be filmed, etc., rather than just really exploiting the situation. And also really like I know that's not the kind of thing you would do, but not doing the like TikTok charity thing of like, hey, look at how I'm helping those people, look at me giving them food, I'm so cool, I'm so good, you know what I mean?
I know, but overall you gotta consider as well that you are not a journalist. So we might think that we are journalists, but we aren't. So I think that's something you got to take in the equation, because they will deal with your debt in a different way than they would deal with a journalist debt. That's all what I'm saying. So you will also, if you die and you get into the news, you will actually cause damage to the Ukrainian cause, because it's like, this fucking dipshit went to Ukraine to film it. So it's like, oh, people are so dumb about it wouldn't look good. Like it would look like there are so many dumb fucks going to Ukraine and doing weird shit, and then people are like probably more turned off by being pro Ukraine in the first place. But,
yeah, fair enough. That's kind of already happened with the people like the really dumb people joining the Foreign Legion. And then being like, I had no military training, I didn't sign up at the embassy, I just went to Ukraine and things happened badly. It's like, what did you expect?
I think overall, I understand this is like where people coming from when they are so hawkish, right? I understand their emotions and their feelings, but we cannot put boots on the ground, and you shouldn't go to Ukraine to defend like a foreign nation like that and be like Slava Ukraine and never know anything about Ukraine whatsoever, besides the fact that there is a war against Russians and you hate the Russians. That's not, you shouldn't be doing that. It's like, it's weird. It's
So I'm a bit less harsh on the concept of foreign legion because it exists in France and it's not like a political problem. But it's a very strict thing. Like joining a foreign legion is almost equivalent to abandoning your original nationality. It's not quite that legally, but symbolically it is that. You're giving up your previous life to start a new one in a new country. And I don't think people understand how serious of a decision that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to like Ukraine, I think it ties into having this conflict, right? When it comes to France and joining like their foreign legion, I think it has to come with like having a new opportunity in life, and it's like you're making the decision. So the things why people join are just vastly different, and that's, I'm not against the foreign legion, but I'm just saying like joining foreign legion because you want to fight for Ukraine. Um, Especially if you don't have any trading, I think it's weird.
Yeah,
it's just overall weird. So.
Well, yeah, especially from that perspective, I read some articles and it's like you're actually a liability. You're risking the lives of the Ukrainian soldiers who now have to train your stupid ass and like have you point the gun in the right direction, and you're like, what the fuck are you you would do more good helping out with refugees, because then you wouldn't be a danger to anyone. Like,
yeah, that. And I was just remembering something that was like with Syria. There was somebody that wanted to fight like ISIS, so he on his own he went to Syria, basically strapped on like bullet chains and with like 2 AKs, and he was just walking around in Syria like some dumb fucking moron. Like, so I think like, yeah, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like, don't do this. This is like not the time and the place. I understand that you will get emotional. I understand that from a lot of people, but that's not a reason why to throw like logic out of the window when it comes to making these decisions. That's boots on the ground. Is that? Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, have you heard of the flip side of that though? When doing research on on like people going to Ukraine to fight the war, I stumbled upon this one Texan guy who went in, I think it was in 2015 or 2016, to fight on the Donbas side for the separatists. He brainwashed himself with Russia Today, and decided that he was gonna go be on the like Donetsk separatist side of the war, and he's been there since like he's been there for like 6-7 years fighting.
Yeah, and I think it's overall still dumb.
It is, yeah. But I mean, at least it was someone with military training, but I don't know. It's interesting. Also, the article I was reading was showing that he was apparently being used a lot, for example, in Russian propaganda, as like, you know, the American who denounced his own country's stuff and is pro-Russian, etc., etc. He kind of became like a very useful PR idiot, basically.
Yeah, are you familiar with like what's his name, Brezhnev or
Brezhnev?
I think I'm completely like off, like I'm thinking about the name, but the North Korean like dude that went to North Korea and stayed there. He is like used in like North Korean like movies and that kind of stuff, and he's like the extremely like good like propaganda tool because he always plays the evil American. And actually like he had like 2 wives, that they both kidnapped, like straight up just kidnapped some lady from Romania, which was his wife, and so he has also like Caucasian or white like children, so those can also play in the movies, which is also nice. So it's
Jesus
like a
Christ,
good
that's
tool.
brutal.
So Korean.
Hey, we were talking about responsible communication. What will you do when a bunch of incels learn that if they become a North Korean like useful Western propagandists, they'll get free waifus? Don't you realize how dangerous it is to throw that information out there?
I think like considering that you can also die and starve to death in Korea, and that you don't have any freedoms, I don't have to necessarily like think that like the waifu is like the biggest like optical like win for people to consider to go to North Korea or not, you know, like but yeah,
I think you're underestimating
understand.
the horny.
Yeah, I'm not that horny. I get that. I took a huge optical L there. Like
Yes, exactly.
So I'm just looking how the guy, because he like we are familiar, but like the lady most of the time, but this guy actually fled to North Korea in the 50s or something, because he was basically a loser that joined the military, and then he was like, America can fuck themselves, and then he just walked. When being stationed there, he walked to the not Ukrainian side, the North Korea side.
Yeah.
Just looking up.
Okay, I'll read one of those paragraphs in chat while you're researching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the largest physically dominant alpha hominids rule over the physically weaker. I understand this. At what point does lust for ever more power and the developed taste of further power and dominance affect the powers entrusted to run it all, finally fall to the unescapable primordial phenomena of long ago researched Stockholm Syndrome? So the thing that, like, 5 paragraphs ago, you were saying that psychology is I don't know exactly what you're saying because I was focused on the discussion with Chinchilla. You were like lambasting psychology as a fake science or something, and now you're citing Stockholm Syndrome. I find that curious. But regardless, how can you call information about biolaboratories propaganda? This is a fact that is recognized by Newland. Yes, biolabs do exist in Ukraine. What an own for NATO, truly. You realize that the part that is propaganda is saying they're bioweapons labs. All Newland has recognized is that the samples of dangerous pathogens need to be destroyed because, as we've seen, even nuclear power plants can be shelled in the war that's going on right now. So obviously, yeah, it's a bit dangerous to continue to do pathogen research in a country that's at war. The WHO agrees with that assessment and has also called for samples to be destroyed in Ukrainian labs. And before you say the stuff like, but the U.S. has like the Department of Defense has been doing funding, etc., that stuff has started under Yanukovych in 2005. That stuff also goes on in Kazakhstan. The program from the Department of Defense is about safe handling of dangerous pathogens, allowing every country to do research on them for the health and good of all of humanity. And I'm not like I don't like believe that that it's like a magic, that it's like magically fairy tale good people want good for everyone. It's just that they acknowledge that dangerous diseases can pop up in a poor country and threaten everyone in the world. So every country should have biolabs. And they want to help that happen. They've been a lot of the financing has been going to countries that are either not aligned with the US and NATO, completely neutral, or countries that are aligned with China or Russia. So how do you explain that? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm in my Twitch chat. I'm getting funded by the Pentagon. I'm glad I'm finally getting paid. So thank
Nice.
you very much. I'm glad
Does that mean we get
getting
paid for lip praxis?
Yeah. So I will ask the Pentagon if they can fund us. So like with 5 viewers, I'm like a huge like funded dude, you know. But yeah, Bookie wants to be funded as well. Can he be funded as well? So no, I looked him up. It's James Bresnov.
Okay.
So or Bresnov. So I will give you a link. You can watch that later. And I'm probably gonna call it because we had some discussions already, and I appreciate the talk. So
Me too.
Also appreciate that we didn't need the moderator. I'm sorry.
I didn't expect us to need one. Yeah, we can be pretty civil.
Are you mad? Are you mad? Are you mad?
I'm very mad. Well, we should. Okay, we would have been nice to have a moderator just so we could do the mute unmute thing from the Haas debate.
Yeah, that's why I have also like I have the conversations in my Discord. You know, like I'm not gonna like that's the issue with having like the group DMs and having the conversations that way, because if people are actually like bad faithing, right?
Yeah.
They can just unmute themselves and that kind of stuff, and then consider that I'm not huge or something, people are ready to burn that bridge anyway. So if it's like Dylan Burns, you know, you don't want to burn that bridge. So people would respect those moderation rules. Yeah. No. Okay.
All right. Thanks for the talk.
So,
thanks. I really appreciate that you listened to me in good faith as well. I didn't expect any different, but I really do appreciate that.
I'm always bad faithing, you know.
Yeah. I hope you felt that I did the same to you. I tried at least, and no bridges burnt yet.
No, that's also like pretty hard overall. If you want to burn a bridge with me, you just got to be like obnoxious. So
yeah,
that's the only way. If you get a dumb opinion, I don't care. But yeah,
nice.
I got that link for you for the defector, and then yeah, thank you for having that conversation as well with me. So
all right, cool. See you
I'm
around.
gonna go. Okay.
See you on
Bye-bye.
Tuesday, right?
Tuesday. Yeah, we lip praxis. We're gonna invite Stardust is coming on and Myers is coming on. Yeah, it's going to be about Indian politics, and I was thinking about this. Myers wanted to talk about like nationalism in India. I want to bring one geopolitical topic around like India, if it's like going to stay like a non-aligned country in the future, like if so I thought that might be interesting. And for the third thing, I don't know. Do you have like any suggestions of what we should talk about when it comes to India?
I know I haven't started doing my research yet. I need to like get a clearer picture of what's going on right now. I know we had that discussion where we mentioned where we talked about the regional elections with the Modi's stuff. I need to brush up on it again, honestly. I'm
talking mostly about like the Modi stuff within like Kashmir and all the racism and the horrible things that are going on there. So yeah, I was thinking about that in context of nationalism.
I guess we could. One way to frame it maybe would be like internal nationalism, so the problems with racism, Islamophobia, and such, and then external nationalism, where there's ongoing territorial conflicts with Pakistan and China, and how India, for example, has been continuing to arm itself, and I don't know, maybe there's not that much to say about that, but
yeah, people, and I'm not quite sure. Like I think that will be brought up when it comes to if the country stays like non-aligned in the future. I think that would be brought up as well then, right?
Yeah.
The same. But yeah, I'm gonna go. So thank you very much for everything, and bye bye.
Bye bye. Damn, Seeker, you got fucking BTFO'd. I was actually gonna address what he was saying, but he had to go be a dick. That was a deserved ban. I ain't hating. By the way, Sign, I wanted to talk to you. How are you doing? I imagine you're like busy with work and whatnot. I haven't seen you in streams.gg or in my chat either much. Hope you're doing well. And wondering if you want to like play some World of Tanks someday or something, or like hang out. I appreciated hanging out with you. They went fully obnoxious with Sign. That's a good reason. Yeah. That was a good ban. Sign has been busy getting juiced. True. He's been getting the juice. All right, so I need to change topics. James Dresnock, the defector. Okay, we'll check that out. Nothing to really report on. I'm easy, just loosely retreated from the world. I could masturbate, and I could be in pain and like breathing, like spitting my lungs out. Oh shit! Thank you for the raid. Hey Bookie, how are you doing? Are we ready to fight for over? Ready to fight over which independence movement is better, the Quebec or the Corsican one? Did you see Destiny reacting to cat juicing? No, I was busy when you linked me that. Gonna leave soon? Alright, no worries. Here, let me change the stream title. We're going back to transgender athletics. Testosterone is not a measure of performance. Okay, it's a bit long-winded. It's not my best clickbait title, but did the Corsicans able to get referendums? Yeah, I think so. I could be wrong on that. It could be just be polling though.
That's usually I usually try to have dates as close as possible to my house so I can go to bed very quickly. So that would be the utility of that type of thing. Like, yeah, come over. You seem fine, but I just want to drink juice. Do you want to have juice at my house? I have a lot of juice. Like, yeah, I don't.
That's
really,
so cute.
I just don't like any of these different types of weird like discourses because I think all of it's just like. I think everybody thinks that like if they've seen like Roofed V and like Richard Lauriana like enough times that they all think that they're like a pickup artist. That's usually I usually try to have dates as close as possible to my house so I can.
She's a juicer. I think that's super cute. Look, I love juice, okay? I've been drinking juice. I have mad respect for Cat, okay? I actually you know what? I'm gonna tweet this out at Cat, I think. I'll keep the tab open. Juice is often too sugary. It is, yeah, but I'm okay with that. I'm contactable whenever though, so down for whatever, whenever, usually Discord or whatever. Yeah, I was thinking of messaging you on Discord, but I keep forgetting, but I will do that. Why, may I ask, sexuality has been used as a demoralizing weapon lately? I don't know what you mean by that. By demoralizing weapon. I'm a black tea addict. Black tea is juicy. I like tea as well. Alright, let's go back to this fucking video. This video has been making me mad, dude. Okay, so just because we're changing subjects here, just to give some context, before the talk with Chinchilla, I was catching up on the transgender athletics. By the way, Destiny follows way more political streams than we realize. Like, you might not know it, but he suddenly will bring up a talking point you have been making for weeks. Okay. Hey, that's my chance to shine. I did of Odin link that? No. So we've been talking about the discourse recently around transgender athletics. One thing that really bothers me, I've changed my mind over the past 24 hours, honestly, several times. He watched your debate once. I know he watched the I know which one you're talking about for 5 seconds. Yeah, I was on his stream for 5 seconds. Anyways, this article, I'm gonna link it in chat for anyone who missed me reading it earlier, is a really, really good article on why testosterone is not a very good Oh wait, no, that's the wrong article. Fuck. I'm sorry, that's the wrong article. That's the interview. God damn it. Okay, let me find the correct article. My bad. It was something Psy. Let me open up my today's history. Oops, not downloads. History, blah blah blah. Oh, there it is. Okay, this is the article I was thinking of. The complicated truth about testosterone's effect on athletic performance. Okay, the second link is the right article I was thinking of. Because people have been sharing this idea that I myself believe that testosterone is a really, really strong determining factor in athletic performance. It's a much more contested thing than... It might still be true. It might still be true, but testosterone is far from being the only factor, or perhaps even among the most important factors when it comes to that. According to that article, the studies mentioned in that article, it seems like a complicated subject. Why am I bringing this up? Because this motherfucker makes a 50-minute video bashing Leah Thomas's performance, and it's like, until now, every single thing he's brought up, we've debunked. He's brought up the fact that when she competed as a male in the NCAA, or rather, she didn't actually compete as a male. If he'd actually read her interview, which is the first link I posted, she was already transitioning, but she, where was it? Yeah. For her junior year, though, she would compete with men, but it would be on her terms. At the team's first Ivy League meet on November 9th, 2019, Thomas put on a women's suit and swam the 1,000-yard freestyle against the Columbia men. She swam sporadically at meets after that, pulling back as she got used to her body and the slower times she produced. Why am I bringing this up? Because this is like the main conservative talking point when it comes to when it comes to this. This idea that she was ranked 468th or 4th, something like that, 460th when competing with men, but then ranked first when competing with women is false. She was already undergoing treatment and still competing against men when she was ranked 460th. Before her treatment in 2018, she was consistently in the top 8 in every single category at the collegiate level. As a male swimmer. She was a top-level male swimmer without the hormone treatment. And no one's fucking talking about that, and pisses me off. Anyways.
Like if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you have higher than normal testosterone levels or free test levels, and you have hirsutism, you're going to have, potentially hoarseness of the voice too. You might have, the facial hair growth, body hair growth, all these kind of like standard masculinizing characteristics that you...
So here he's talking about specific hormone treatments.
Like anti-androgens to suppress that activity. Something interesting is the fact that finasteride, a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor that is literally prescribed to men widespread for hair loss prevention, is as effective for attenuating hirsutism in females as the anti-androgen spironolactone. So the anti-androgen
I used to try finasteride.
Using is, I literally have as much androgenicity reduction from I have more androgenicity reduction from my dutasteride use for hair loss prevention than Leah Thomas has from spironolactone for androgen receptor antagonism. Like, it's not a very potent anti-androgen. It's actually probably more useful as a diuretic. And to be honest, I think its utility in pharmacology as an anti-androgen, I think it's poor, to be honest. I think there are more progressive anti-androgens that would be more effective, to be honest. But anyways, that's kind of, just an explanation of what it is. But then the estrogen therapy too, obviously concurrently administering exogenous estradiol, you're going to have significant negative feedback to your HPTA, which would then tell your brain, your hypothalamus would register, oh, I have sufficient estradiol levels, so I don't need to produce gonadotropin-releasing hormones. So no more GnRH is getting shot down to the pituitary, which is less LH and FSH production being shot down to your gonads, which means less testosterone production in your testicles. So you have this 1-2 punch of anti-androgenic activity as well as estrogen therapy to not only reduce masculinization, the maintenance of masculine features with the androgen reduction, antagonism at the receptor, as well as some minor steroidogenesis inhibition. But in addition to that, the negative feedback by estrogen and the feminization of estrogen. We see males develop, bitch tits all the time, even on shit tons of testosterone.
That's a weird way of saying it.
Activity in your body doesn't mean you're void of estrogenicity. So with this individual, we have a big hit of estrogen, seemingly on a daily basis, or some level of estrogen that puts them into physiologic ranges, presumably to induce feminizing feature progression, growing breasts and whatnot. But the anti-androgenic activity, how significant is it? We're going to see shortly, where we get into the pharmacology of this stuff first. So spironolactone, pharmacokinetics of estradiol, pharmacokinetics of sublingual estradiol, pharmacokinetics of spironolactone. These are drugs that have reasonably short half-lives. The actual stipulations of when you show up and get your testosterone tested and you have to be suppressed below this 10 nanomole per liter cutoff is actually pretty fucking loose. It is not something that seemingly is tested hardcore into competition. It's something that within 28 days, no earlier than 28 days, should you be registering as these testosterone level, exceeding these testosterone levels. You need to be tested within 28 days and have tested underneath the cutoff. But again, the cutoff, absurdly high to begin with. Above and beyond that, if you were tested within 28 days, let's just say you're tested 2 weeks out. It's like, oh, you know, you're obviously following protocol. You're obviously on your therapy. How quick are these drugs in and out of your system? It's pretty fucking quick. So let's get into the spironolactone pharmacokinetic profile. So we have levels of spironolactone after oral administration.
I don't really know how to address all this like science stuff he's talking about, because the very basic premise of his argument, which is that testosterone is the like be-all end-all of performance, is already debunked in this in like our discourse. So I don't understand. I just got here with this topic. What's my point of view? I'm still forming it. If you'd asked me a day ago, I would have been like, yeah, the thing is, testosterone is actually like a performance-enhancing drug, etc., etc. It's much more complicated than that. Doing research on it has opened my eyes to the fact that we actually don't yet understand all of the mechanisms underlying sexual dimorphism between in athletic performance. We don't understand the mechanisms. And saying gatekeeping based on testosterone levels doesn't seem to make proper scientific sense. It makes some sense. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Testosterone does affect certain very key parts of our metabolism, but there are plenty of counterexamples and counterfactuals that completely debunk the narrative. So the article I linked here brings some of the more interesting paradoxes that it points out. I would say are testosterone levels in... let me scroll down to the right part. Oh yeah, you cannot predict their performance, men's performance based on their testosterone levels. The same goes for women. And you can get some clues by looking at women with androgen receptor mutations. So women who don't react to testosterone, whose receptors for the androgen hormones don't react to testosterone. So even though those women have higher testosterone levels, the testosterone cannot affect their metabolism directly, or if at all, in like a severe case of the mutation. And yet, those women are extremely overrepresented among elite athletes, meaning there has to be something else in their biology or their genetics that predisposes them for better performance that is not the testosterone, since the testosterone has much less of an effect on their body, if at all, than among people who don't have the androgen receptor mutation. So, for example, the researcher working on this, Holt, suggests part of it might be growth hormone, basically trying to account for the Y chromosome there. There are other issues with the testosterone narrative or hypothesis. One study of professional male triathletes found no relationship between testosterone levels and performance. Another, looking at professional cyclists, found the same lack of correlation. Yet another, comparing cyclists, weightlifters, and controls to each other on the cycling test, found a negative correlation between testosterone levels and performance. A study of teenage weightlifters found no relationship between boys' testosterone levels and a negative correlation among the girls. Some studies have even found mixed or opposing results within their own findings. One found that sprinters seemed to get an advantage from testosterone, while other runners did not. Another came to the conclusion that it helped female track athletes, but not male ones. Basically, from a scientific methodology perspective, when you look at like many contradictory studies, either you go into detail, and maybe there's some problems with methodology, etc., but my naive interpretation of this is that we have not been able to isolate testosterone as a variable, meaning, or put in other words, there are other variables that supersede the influence testosterone has. Meaning, testosterone is not the most important variable in the difference between athletic performance between men and women. Yeah, biology seems super complicated, and reducing things down to single variables often doesn't seem to work. But similarly, maleness doesn't just simply reduce down to testosterone only, does it? Well, the problem is sports organizations have been reducing it to that. So, final argument against testosterone. One analysis found that 25% of elite male athletes have testosterone levels below what the International Association of Athletics Federations consider the lower limit for men. What's more, it wasn't the athletes in less strength or speed-oriented sports. Some of the events with the most men below the limit were powerlifting, rowing, track and field, ice hockey, and rowing. They're rowing twice. What the fuck? Anyways. Yeah. The problem is, female athletes like champion sprinters Caster Semenya and Dutee Chand have had to fight in recent years for the right to compete as women because their natural testosterone levels are far higher than the average woman's. Organizations like the International Association of Athletics Federations and the International Olympic Committee have put hard limits on the amount these women are allowed to have in their bloodstream, on the grounds that it enhances their performance in a way that's unfair to their fellow competitors. So this is one problem. The other problem is, the reason I'm covering this is because we're in the middle of basically discourse in the US over trans athletes, because Leah Thomas, a trans woman who transitioned, who started transitioning like 3 years ago, has broken records in her category in swimming. However, and there's this false narrative that's being vehiculated that I believe, because it's like hard to debunk. It's not that hard to debunk. You just have to read her interview. But if all you look at is if you don't dig any deeper, the narrative is you're looking at someone who, when she competed against men, she ranked 460th, and then when she competed against women, she ranked first. So people like this YouTuber are looking at it and are like, whoa, she's basically using gender theory to cheat, to score first, even though she was a mediocre athlete. When the reality but the problem is, like, the whole narrative is false. In 2018, before she started hormone therapy, she was top of her category. She scored top 8 in multiple different swimming categories at the collegiate level at which she was competing. In 2019, when she was ranked 460th, was when she was already undergoing hormone therapy, which is supposed to reduce like her muscle mass and affect her biology in a way that reduces her performance. And her performance has gone down. She's lost like 30 seconds compared to her records. Now, does that mean that she doesn't have an advantage? She probably still has an advantage from having been assigned male at birth. She's very tall for a woman. She has a large wingspan. Obviously, there's women who have that too, but like those seem like they could be advantages for swimming. But yeah. So she had poor performance against men when she was transitioning to a woman, exactly. But she had top of her class performance against men when she was not yet transitioning. When she had a full like male biology, she was a top 8 swimmer with like yeah, she had like top tier finishes. This makes sense because if you look at athletes in sports, there are specific body types that are often universal in each sport. The shape and size of the bodies are a large portion of how you dominate in your sport. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think this article mentions it too, like how gymnasts are small, or like you'll never see a tall gymnast beat equivalently trained smaller gymnasts. They'll have a better sense of balance, a lower center of weight in their body, and they'll be able to perform more complex and more technical and more precise movements. Okay, 990. I can't address your stuff. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you chill, please? Or like stay on topic, okay? We're not talking about military cults, whatever the fuck that is. If you continue like paragraph posting, I'm gonna time you out for a little bit, okay? Just chill. But yeah, so like, and then the main problem is comes down to a problem of misunderstanding what it is to be trans, because the people who are against trans athletes, there are like only two arguments. There's either an entirely like transphobic, trans-denying argument of being trans is a choice, so they choose to do something that enhances their relative performance, so they're doping. Because the only thing you're supposed to be able to do is train better. But if you acknowledge that transness is an inherent fact of life for a trans person, okay, I'm cool. All right, no worries. If you acknowledge that transness is if you acknowledge that transness is an inherent thing, then it gets a bit more complicated. Like undergoing hormone therapy is, or transitioning still is a choice, but it's not much of a choice. Honestly, you're suffering from, you're probably just suffering from gender dysphoria. I wouldn't perceive it as a choice. So then the last defense there would be of denying trans athletes under some guise of something could be unfair or fair, would be arguing that there could be athletes who pretend to be trans in order to get better performance. Which right now I would say it's concern trolling. The social backlash for being trans, especially a trans athlete, I think would far outweigh the disadvantages, especially if you think of someone moving from the male athlete industry to the female athlete industry or women's athlete industry. The women's athletes earn less. They get less recognition. They get less time on TV. They get less people going to view their events. If you actually are fully career oriented, you would need to be absolutely certain that you're gonna absolutely perform like crazy for it to pay off, because you're probably gonna do better as a maybe slightly less incredible male athlete. Still, that argument will exist, and I don't yet know how to address it. Anyways, I'm rambling because I don't yet have like a strict idea on this. I'm not trans, and I'm not an athlete. I have no stake in this game personally. So I'm just like trying to educate myself, really. I believe there should be open leagues, segregate women and men, but also have an open league. Could also lead to women being paid more if they want to compete in an open league, which could tap into a new market of interest. Depending on the sport, I genuinely think that that would be absolutely valid. So for fighting sports, I think that would probably be a terrible idea. But there are a lot of sports that probably could be mixed and I like or open. That shouldn't pose a problem. I'm a heterosexual, by the way. Am I a bad guy now because I refuse to have my own sexuality be compromised? No one's trying to compromise your sexuality. The only people telling you that your sexuality is under threat are like weirdo alt-right culture war people. But heterosexuality is not under attack. It's just that people are acknowledging other alternatives and giving them, you know, screen time and representation and all those things. But those aren't threats to heterosexuality. Fallon Fox was a woman transgender who beat up some women pretty bad, but it would be the decision to compete, not a requirement. Yeah. Based on body types and overall performances, sports besides team sports like football and rugby should be segregated by height and weight more than sex. Well, the problem with that is that for now, on average, for the same body weight, a woman will be disadvantaged compared to the same body weight in a man, and like similar training. Obviously, those are like statistics, but on average, that is the state of our knowledge as far as the sexual dimorphism goes. So I don't know if that that doesn't necessarily work. One thing I was thinking of before diving deep into the problems with considering testosterone, I was wondering if doing categories by hormone levels could work. But I don't think that would work anymore. Height and weight, I don't know if that's enough. I genuinely don't think that's even taking into account height and weight, I don't think it works. I could be wrong though. If you like have a study on it, I would love to see it. And I'm not saying this in like a challenging way. I'm genuinely trying to just educate myself. But yeah. Like they do for wrestling and lifting competition. Yeah, my understanding, once again, I could be wrong on this. I haven't like actually delved deep into that aspect of the question, but it is that that like pound per pound, the body mass of a man is going to represent much more strength than the body mass of a woman. And then maybe you can balance for height as well, but you won't be able to compensate for that reality just that way.
Dose, and we can see here in hours. This is not days. This is not weeks.
A woman versus a man has been done across many sports, from tennis to MMA, and the men have dominated. It's not even close. There are sports where the opposite happens. Sports that require fine motor control, like shooting sports, are sports where women can defeat, and in fact could be considered biologically predisposed to be better than men. And also extreme endurance, from what I've seen. Extreme endurance, like ultra marathons, are situations where like actual raw strength no longer matters at all, and a woman's biology will actually have an advantage. Other than like those two fields, though, from what I've seen, you're mostly correct. Though there's a final also problematic factor, which is that society has a systemic predisposition for encouraging male athletes. I've already mentioned better pay, better competitive infrastructure. There is a genuine problem, and you see that like in esports or in other sports where there is no biological difference between men and women that should explain difference in performance. It's purely societal, and yet you still see like men e-athletes be much better at the video games they play than the women teams. I don't think it's a biological reason. And so you can have huge differences in performance just because of basic like societal imbalances. So it's hard to really narrow down what's at play here. Though I'm not saying this to deny that there is also a biological reality. It's just you gotta wrap your head around all those different factors, and the fact that it's really hard to isolate them one by one to understand what's going on. Any solution will need to be balanced against the viability of the sport commercially. Otherwise, you just end up destroying the sport. It's an absolute fucking minefield to navigate. Yes, that's a concern I haven't addressed yet. That's absolutely true. If the sport is very niche and has like no one watching it, and can barely sustain like a men's and a women's field, you can't start adding more categories. It's just not going to be viable. I understand the natural processes of the hominid body. Procreation and multiplying ourselves is integrated into our very being by our past evolved natures. If one chooses to not to procreate for, say, an ancient group of people that understood the concept of procreation and turned around and used it to procreate entire armies to self-sustain their empire, shall we persecute them? I'm not sure what you're getting at. There's no studies, unfortunately. Abolish all sports. Nice. There's no undercut studies, unfortunately, not that I know of, but as someone who swam in high school and dove in college, wrestled in high school, and lifted with the weight trainers because that just happened to be the time I could be in the shared space, height and weight seemed far better options over just sex or just testosterone. Okay, interesting. I think there's hand-eye coordination in biology, which would make sense for video games. Naturally would make sense for men to have better hand-eye coordination. I'm not a biologist though, lol, but I'm sure there's literature on this. I have read a study on hand-eye coordination a couple years ago, and that study tested on that study basically hinged on early age activities. And what that study showed was that indeed, men have better hand-eye coordination, but it had nothing to do with biology. It had to do with socialization, because kids are socialized to play with balls, to play games that directly train their hand-eye coordination. And girls are trained to play games that train their... girls are trained to play games that train their... usually like stereotypically train their like their social and emotional aspects, like let's go full stereotype. Like, the boys will be playing with a ball, so obviously hand-eye coordination training from a very young age. The girls will be playing like with tea, simulating like a dinner. And what do you end up with? You end up with women who are much better at communicating and understanding their emotions and understanding other people's emotions and conversations, and men who are much better at hand-eye coordination. It's not rocket science. Like, if you do something from a very young age, you're going to be much better at it. And that study showed that when girls had more of a gender neutral youth, with more like sports and balls and stuff, they had good hand-eye coordination. Testosterone levels actually have a huge influence on athletes' performances. It's much more nuanced than that, Siro sans codeine. So exogenous testosterone, for example, is a doping drug. There's no denying that. But endogenous testosterone, the one that's already produced by our body, it's not a clear factor for determining an athlete's performance. I'll link you an article here that cites various studies, and you can let me know if you see any issues with it. But basically, when it comes to endogenous testosterone, you have, for example, we just went over it, so I'll go over it very fast. But for example, one analysis found that 25% of elite male athletes have testosterone levels below what the International Association of Athletics Federations considered the lower limit for men. What's more, it wasn't the athletes in less strength or speed-oriented sports. Some of the events with the most men below the limit were powerlifting, rowing, track and field, ice hockey. Here's a series of studies where testosterone levels and performance either had no relationship, or or studies were contradictory, or even negative correlation between testosterone levels and performance. It is surprising. Like, if you asked me yesterday, I would have 100% agreed with you. But since then, I've read this article, and I changed my mind. I'm open to change my mind if there's like better science. This is from 2019, so maybe there's better science. Okay, let's see. Did it mute me again now? Yep, I'm muted.